Welcome, Strike Team. Welcome to another episode of Strike Talk. Today we are going to be interviewing Daniel Marino. He is a well-respected martial artist in the karate and Tang Sudo, the Korean karate world. He's somebody who, if you're into the practical martial arts, especially on the instructor side, somebody that you probably know. He has one of the more popular Facebook groups called Tang Sudo Korean Karate, or it's practical Tang Sudo Korean
Yep.
Karate. Um, he's also known for the Naihanchi project, where he deep dives into the Naihanchi, also known as the Tekikata, and really breaks it down, probably in more detail with more practical proof than anyone else I've seen online. He's somebody that I saw when I first got into this practical side of the karate world, and who I followed from the very beginning as one of the kind of instructors who I think is really doing it right. And uh, I'm happy to have you on. Happy to kind of hear about your journey to where you are now. And if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about, you know, what your martial arts style is, how you got into it, and how you became, how you got into the practical martial art world.
Mhm. Well, thanks a lot for having me, man. I really appreciate it, and thanks for the kind words. I started training when I was 9 years old in the year 2000. Just for a little bit of background on Tung Sudo, it's just the Korean pronunciation of Karate Do. The older name for the art, which would translate literally as China Hand Way, right, rather than Empty Hand Way. I believe the Korean pronunciation of Empty Hand Way is Kong Sudo. But before prior to the creation of Taekwondo as a national sport for Korea, and where they unified a lot of the schools in the country, Tungsudo was kind of just the generic term or the most common term being used for karate being practiced in Korea at the time. So that's my style. I first trained with Ian Abernethy in 2014. I'd say it's when I really got into the like kata application side of things. It's not that I was something that I'd never done before. My teacher I grew up training with. We would play around with stuff, but it was always just kind of something we did on the side where we would tinker with applications. It wasn't until I first trained with Ian that I really got into it, and because I was exposed to his way of doing things, which was much more in depth and systematic. And since then, yeah, I've started. I run a school, so I've really integrated it into my teaching, and I also do produce a lot of videos that I post online, just kind of sharing my study and my ideas on these things.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, your videos specifically have been an influence of mine. I also I find it interesting how many people Ian kind of introduced almost in a way. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
come from Way to Do, which is, in my opinion, one of the styles that needs the least amount of adaptation because it's
Mhm.
already kind of shows this practicality. But the way Ian breaks everything down, the way he trains it and mixes kind of like the new school to the old school, it's I found him on YouTube and it opened my eyes so much. And then I started doing Shonru and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this.
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
and
and Ian's
yeah,
huge. He's a
yeah,
bit. He's the guy who's been doing this kind of stuff for 25 years, more than that. I mean, his
yeah,
first book came out in 2000, so he's really been real pioneer with it, at least in
yeah.
the West. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this conversation too, because I feel like a lot of the Western karate community kind of becomes insular, and I don't know nearly as much about karate in Okinawa or in Japan, but yeah.
It's it is different. I like the West. There's a lot of cultural differences that I've learned that really stem each group views karate. Um, but yeah, it is interesting. Like Ian and like pushing all of us in the West to kind of do what we've started doing. Um, and now you kind of have this huge online following. I think you have almost 6,000 members on Facebook who are consistently talking and looking at practical applications.
Yeah.
Um, and you also said you started. You said you got into the practical stuff in 2014. You said
Yep.
that is interesting, dude. I did martial arts when I was young, but I consider the beginning of my real martial art training like when it was more than just a after school hobby and something I was really
Hmm.
taking seriously. And maybe I think it was like end of 2010, maybe beginning of 2011. And so you've been in this thing a lot longer than me. I didn't notice. I knew you had been in it longer, but I didn't know it was that much longer. like,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, I started teaching full time as soon as I got out of high school. So,
oh,
yeah, I really, have I all in.
oh,
Yeah,
I
with it. Yeah,
see.
yeah,
I see.
yeah.
Um, okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. So as you start teaching right out of high school, opened up your own. I mean, do you open up your first place by yourself? Or are you teaching under your old instructor?
Well, when I got out of high school, I did an apprenticeship, informal apprenticeship with my teacher where I just taught in his school for a period of about 4 years. I taught
Okay.
full time like that, and I was just living with my family and running classes there. And then I opened up my own spot in 2015, and I've been running it ever since. Hmm. Yeah, it's, yeah, it's a good way to do it. I kind of because coming from a Tungsten background, it's very point fighting is very popular and something that I did a lot, especially when I was younger before I had some injuries. So that's really my only competitive background is in point fighting, and I wish that I had competed in some different styles of competition a little bit before I started teaching, because I understand exactly what you're saying, that it's like, and I do try to keep it forward in my mind that teaching is how I make my living, and I try to always keep it my prime motivation and my number one priority. And I really mean that. I say it often online in the content that I post, but it's just like that's all that I'm really ever trying to do is I'm trying to be a better teacher for my students. It's not that I just, want to make a lot, I don't just get into these kind of controversial subjects, just because, it's like I'm trying to be better for my students always. And I think that's why I have cross trained in combat sports and why I've obsessed over, how we can apply these traditional movements that are found in our forms. But yeah, it's
What?
not. Sorry, please.
No, continue, continue. I thought you were done. Continue, continue.
Oh, I was just saying that I'd like to compete more myself now that I am a teacher, but I think there would have been some very clear advantages to have done that competition stuff
Yeah,
first and then opened up. But I
earlier.
started teaching young. Yeah,
Well, I mean, it is a bit easier. It's not impossible to compete as a teacher. Obviously, many teachers still do. It's just it's like right now I'm in Japan. I compete like once every 2 months, maybe. I've done a
hmm,
lot out here, so like doing it
cool,
like that, always being in fight camp is hard. Um,
sure.
I get it, but I mean, I will say I've watched just from uh seeing you on YouTube, mostly through your Naihanchi project, and
Hmm.
seeing you start off applying the Naihanchi techniques. And one thing I really like that you do is you will post you sparring with your students.
Yeah.
And one thing I have noticed, and again, I come from I'm a karate guy, but if I'm being very fair, uh, I've done karate longer, but I probably spent more hours in Muay Thai.
Hmm.
And so I in that way I'm also very much a Muay Thai guy, and I remember watching you from the beginning, or I won't say the beginning, but from when I first saw you, and to now and seeing your sparring and your movement, and watching you and your clinch work, and some of the stuff you're adding in that's illegal in Muay Thai but beautiful for like self defense and even MMA. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at it, I'm like, I like that.
Yeah.
like,
Thank you.
I like it.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen the growth as you've come into it, and I know, like I said, you go deep into the kata, but the katas can only show so much, especially as they've been slightly changed here and there throughout history for multiple different reasons. Something as simple as the dojo, the shape of the dojo, you got to change something, or one teacher likes to be a higher stance versus a lower stance, whatever. Um,
Sure.
and so how do you because I've seen your sparring evolve. And
Mhm.
are you evolving just off of your own trial and error with your own students? Are you doing it through your cross training? Because I think I know you
Mhm.
do some boxing and jujitsu,
Yeah,
Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
yeah.
Is that
So I
correct?
currently cross train in boxing and Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for that is that I would say it's not only that like the kata can only take you so far. I think it's also that a lot of the practical karate type training, I think can only take you so far as well. Ian was a huge influence for me and still and continues to be because he really introduced me to the idea of clinch fighting, that a lot of what the kata are showing is clinch based fighting, which is something I'm a big believer in. He also, just introduced me to the idea of sparring with applications. His term, he says kata based sparring, it was something that was really a revolutionary idea for me. It changed the way that I saw karate, and and that was the approach that I took to it. I would go to his seminars, I would learn his applications, I would even do some of the live sparring drills with him, although he doesn't do a lot of those in the seminar. I think because he when he has a seminar, he's got a group of big group of strangers, coming together and training together. Yeah, it's not really the best opportunity for intensive sparring. So kind of his seminars are very much based around the bunkai, the applications of the movements. That's what you're going there for. But he introduces you a lot to, I think, the more important like practical concepts, which is like, hey, if you really want to be good at this, you got to do it live. You got to spar with it. That's something that Ian really exposed me to. And I took it to heart. I would go to his seminars and I would go back to my school and we would experiment with doing it live, and a lot of what I developed was just through trial and error like that, like what my students and I could make work. But I also was always aware that, okay, there's some deficiencies here. It's like, just because you can make it work in this situation doesn't mean it's going to work with a better grappler, for instance, and even, with training combat sports, better strikers, because as like karate is kind of point karate is kind of interesting in that the rules remove grappling entirely, but even doing boxing, it's like clinching is involved. Any continuous striking competition will involve some amount of grappling, some amount of clinching with it. It just naturally occurs. But in karate, point point karate, you don't have that. Sorry. Sure. No, it's all good. No, I'm yeah.
No, I was just gonna agree. Even like you talk about boxing, like they have, you don't clinch, but there you do get close. And any real striking, you're gonna end up in clinch range, even if the sport rules require you to separate.
Hmm.
They will separate you when you hit clinch range. Meaning, if this is a real fight, it wouldn't be happening right now. We would be clinching. We would be in
Yeah.
there doing all those things. And similarly, as you so we got like real karate are the katas being mostly in that clinch range. It's something that I discovered too. I discovered it. The first time I actually discovered it was before Ian. I discovered it. I discovered it when I was learning a Shotokan kata, and I was like, "Oh, this would be really good from a clinching perspective." And I was actually told that I was being ridiculous and that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I ended up finding a book by one of Lyoto Machida's instructors who actually had the
Oh,
same application I had as a clinch application. I was like, I told you. And then
cool.
and then I end up finding Ian, and then I end up seeing you and what you were doing in Naihanchi, and I was like, that this is insane. And
Yeah.
I noticed a bit of clinch in Naihanchi just from that opening. I was like,
Sure.
that's for
Yeah.
sure clinch.
Yeah.
Um, but the way in which I saw you really start, like, it's so clear when you spar with it, um, and even explaining this to like Muay Thai guys who like did a little karate when they were younger and don't want to hear it, and I'm like, no, it is. This is it. And then
Yeah.
seeing you, it's like it's so clear. And again, and I'm just rambling about how much I love watching your videos because it really, I
I appreciate it,
it
man.
really, it really was a a moment where I'm like, this is how I wish everybody was doing it, and people will kind of, again, you don't have to do karate to be practical necessarily. Like it can be, you can use it for artistic purposes, you can use it for meditative purposes, just health purposes.
Sure.
But so many schools approach or teach karate for those things. It could be art, meditation, health, just cultural connection. Um, and then claim, great martial ability without having any kind of time spent learning to apply it. And
Hmm.
or it'll be a situation where you learn the kata and you learn sparring separately, like they're not even the same thing. And
Sure.
it's like, then why are we wasting this time doing the kata?
Yeah.
And again, you're not doing that. So I mean, you're taking that kata the way, like, and really breaking it down. Um, I was
Yo, man, I'm
get
sorry. Did we just cut out?
oh, I'm just saying, you take the kata and you train it with your students in such a way where I know that they can actually apply what they're learning.
Hmm.
Um, because you're and so I want to know, how much time do you spend with your students when it comes to learning the kata almost just to make it beautiful? Like learning it
Hmm.
in depth the way you would maybe do it at a more traditional school that's not doing so much application. And how much time do you spend uh, going over application drills, things like how do you structure your class?
Sure. Yeah. So I teach a lot of different age groups, of course. Most of my students are pretty young kids. For my younger kids, I teach not too dissimilar from the way I was taught when I was young. I look at the forms, as we call them in Tung Sudo, I look at the kata as a way to strengthen their bodies, to teach them discipline. They're learning a traditional art by practicing them. It's not, I do have clinching drills that I do with them, just to kind of to create a foundation for them to develop some really fundamental abilities that help them to apply what they do. But I don't really, harp on it too much at that age group. I look at them, I have 3 classes that I teach every day. My first class is about ages 5 to 8. For them, I look at the biggest benefit for martial arts training for them is mostly behavioral. Like I want them to learn to be disciplined, to be focused, to be hardworking, to get along with their peers, like all that stuff. All that stuff. My second age group is ages about like 9 to 12, and my classes are pretty informal. So I do have some older kids that stay in that class for longer, but at that age, I concentrate a lot more on like the sport karate aspect of things. And again, they are doing a lot of the clinching. For everybody in my school, we practice the close range stuff. And I do tell my students, this is much more closely related to what our forms are. But, I think at that age too, it's a really good benefit for them to get into the point sparring type training and the competition type training, the kata competition type training, because, again, it was something that I did that I was young. It's the only sport that I ever participated in. I think sports really are good for people, like especially young people, really good influence for them. And then it's my last class, my teen and adult class, where things change pretty significantly, where the clinching is, like when a brand new white belt comes in first day, and it's one of the first things that they learn is basic clinching skills. It's like inside control. It's like better to have your arms inside their arms. That's Uechiru. All right. It's better to have your arms inside their arms if you can, right? If you can break their posture, it's generally good for you and bad for them. It's like that. That's like just super basic stuff that everyone does when they get to the teen and the adult level. And I don't concentrate nearly as much on forms either, kata, hyung either. It's a part of our training, because I do consider it an important part of the art at all levels, but it's something that in the teen and adult class, you spend maybe 10 minutes on when we practice it. It's like a part of the warm up beginning, go through the forms. Oh, wait, most of what we do in that class is either sparring or pad work, like, and those are the things that I consider the important, like what really develops your ability and your skill is the live training that you do, and then the supplemental impact training that you do, because you have to train safely where we're not hitting each other full contact. You got to hit something, you got to hit a pad full contact. So that's kind of how it progresses for me, is that and again, this is an idea that Ian talks about a lot as well, is that karate it can be practiced, and it is practiced in so many different ways, and there's an advantage to this because different practitioners have different needs, especially when we're looking at the age groups where we're talking about, what you don't get in as many martial arts. I mean, it's mostly kids that do karate, now in the West, at least in the United States. And, do I need to harp on the application stuff with them a lot? Is like, does it really matter, how the form is applied, because you're talking to a 7-year-old, it's like,
Yeah.
for them, it's like, no, I want you to be strong and disciplined and focused. In order for you to make your body move in exactly this way, you're going to have to develop those mental skills. You're going to have to develop that athleticism. And, I think that there's also some historical precedent to that with the way the art was developed. It's important to remember that, contrary to something that's still like a very common belief in the karate community, the art did not start changing when it was exported to mainland Japan. The changes started to occur in Okinawa itself, especially when Itosu started teaching karate in the Okinawan school systems. It's like these changes had already occurred before the art came to Japan. And I think you can see that in the very structure of what we think of as karate today, is that it's physical education. Like, I don't think that Itosu is teaching sparring in the school systems, right? His training seemed to have been mostly based on kata, with supplemental exercises, like prearranged kumite, and probably some hojo undo, some, makiwara training, stuff like that. I think that kind of makes sense from a physical education standpoint, that it's like, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to make these young people healthier and more disciplined, more focused, more driven, right? I think it's funny because it's a full circle thing with a lot of people, myself included, in the practical karate community. That's like, at first, everybody kind of like, that's, you grow up with that or I grew up with that as kind of a part of the art. And then you're like, yeah, but I want to learn real karate now. And it's like, and there's something to that, of course, like learning applications, and also just, having a better appreciation for the importance of sparring and developing any kind of functional ability. But at the same time, unless you're talking about, you want to go back to Todi, like whatever art existed before the term karate existed, right? But as long as people have been calling this karate, there has been a very real aspect of the art that is just about physical education, in my opinion. And I think that does serve young kids pretty well. And I don't think it's coincidental that, these changes occurred around the time that it was first introduced into the school systems.
Again, karate as a purely it's purely just art to help you physically, like a sport, like any other sport. And also, you talked earlier about like how with kids you want to help them develop certain attributes,
Yep.
discipline, and working well with others and all that kind of stuff. If you read, again, everyone always quotes Genshin's books. He talks about that exact thing, that being one of his selling points for why it's important for being in schools. Um, and I do think, especially now that I'm living here in Okinawa and experiencing the Japanese culture comparable to the West, that there is a large difference in the way in which we view um, martial arts and the need to be able to actually fight for ourselves. So I noticed in the West, we have this view of just in general, self defense being important, the ability to defend yourself. I mean, we live in a more violent society. Japan is possibly, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I've looked them up. It's in the top three when it comes to like violent crime, like safest places I think in the world. Like
Hmm.
their idea, like violent crime to them is almost non-existent here in Okinawa. The only people, like if you want to fight in Okinawa, you go to Gate 2, which is where all the Americans hang out. Like you go to the strip of bars and
Yeah.
clubs at Gate 2. That's the only place you're gonna find fights because it's military. Nowhere
Yeah.
else does it exist, and it's it's something that's. I remember I was speaking to a coworker here, and she asked me why I do martial arts. And I was going through all these things. I went, from Power Rangers. That was my, childhood
Yeah.
inspiration
Yeah.
to being interested in self defense. And her actual response was, "Why do you need self defense?" That was
Yeah.
that's a direct quote. And
Sure.
so it just shows the difference in the way the Japanese society is structured. And like you can leave your key in your car when you go in to go shopping. No one touches your car.
Yeah.
I can leave it running. Um, I use my phone as a placeholder in Japanese bars so I can walk away and no one take my seat. I'll leave my cell phone. Like that's
Yeah.
how safe it is. And so
Crazy.
it's it's crazy. And so
Yeah.
I hope these things don't follow me back to America because I will get so robbed. I gotta,
Yeah.
gotta get rid of these habits.
Yeah, man.
But
And self-defense is one that I think is such a loaded term. It's so it means so many different things to so many different people.
yes,
And I think even what obviously there are cultural differences here.
yeah,
It's I'm from the Philadelphia area. There's definitely is crime in Philadelphia. Say this, you're from San Francisco, aren't you?
uh, across the bridge, Oakland.
Gotcha. It's like
Yeah, definitely
it
crime.
definitely is a practical need for self-defense. And I would say that, and Japan, I'm sure, is a very safe country. But listen, I mean, there's still bullies in schools, I'm sure.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, there's still, this is human nature. Like, there is a definitely a role that self-defense has to play in our lives. But martial artists in general tend to way overemphasize, like the need you have for self defense. And not only that, they also tend to way overemphasize the need that like fighting plays in self defense. When the
yeah,
reality
that's
is that
true. That's so true.
the most important things about self defense have a lot more to do with the soft skills, with like your awareness and
That's
the way that
100% true.
you know, this was something that was big for me, and I know that I think it would be really interesting to talk to you about because you have a lot more combat sport experience than I do. But something that somebody said to me, well, that's one of the things about communicating with people online is that sometimes I forget where I don't know exactly where somebody said this to me, but it stuck with me. And they said that you know martial artists really, karate guys specifically, should really respect the intensity of what people do in combat sports. Like you should respect fighters because the stuff that they go through is intensive. It's like it's hard training. They're getting in that ring to knock each other out. And it's one of those things that it's like, you know, it's something that really has started to rub me the wrong way. It's a pet peeve of mine that when martial artists talk so much about self-defense, where they're like, yeah, well, we train for self-defense, not that sport stuff. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. It's just like, you know, it's one of those things where if you want to learn how to fight and defend yourself, it's like the guys who get in the ring and do it for real have experience that is really, really valuable for that. And what I was specifically told by somebody who I forget who was, it said, if you're not going to fight yourself, that's fine. It's not for everyone, but you should train with fighters. You should have like the humility to be like, okay, I don't want to get in there and do it myself, but how do the guys that do get in there and do it, how do they train? What is that stuff like? And it kind of just set off light bulbs in my head. There's like, yeah, it's one of the problems I think sometimes with karate is like, your sensei or like master so and so. I'm kind of a big deal. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have all these people that follow me. And it's like, yeah, man, but you've never gotten in there and really fought, like, and I'm not trying to be too critical. That's me, my only competitive experience is in point fighting. I've never done any kind of full contact competition. But it's just one of those things that it's like, if you're not going to do that yourself, don't you think maybe you should like see what training's like for the people that do? You know, or we can just, like have this imaginary self-defense scenario in our head that's like, yeah, well, none of that matters because I train for self-defense. And it's like, well, what even is that? It's like, oh, that's non-consensual fighting. It's like, yeah, but fighting is fighting, at a certain point. Like self-defense certainly incorporates a lot more than just fighting. But like if you want fighting skills, and they do aid, just good thing to have for self-defense, you need that. And I don't know what your perspective would be with the Japanese culture with something like that, but I think that's the big thing for me, is that I don't feel like particularly motivated by self-defense anymore. It's like I want to be a fight. I want to know how to fight, and I want to be able to teach others how to fight, and that has a role to play in self-defense, albeit, maybe not the largest one. But I think that a lot of the soft skills, the other benefits, I mean, it's good, I think, especially for young men, to just feel that like they can handle themselves. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like I'm not like particularly paranoid about self-defense. Like I'm walking around like, like, well, afraid I'm gonna get mugged or something, as if like karate is what's gonna save me in a situation like that necessarily. It's more that I just want to have the confidence, and for my students, I want to be able to teach others. For my students, I want to have the confidence that if somebody were to get like aggressive with me or something like that, I wouldn't feel like I don't have something that can aid me in that kind of a situation. It just gives you the ability, it gives you some confidence where you can engage with the world in a way that you feel physically able to defend yourself if you have to. I think that the psychological benefit of that can be really good for people. I think it's something that people really do want to have.
I agree with everything you said on multitudes of levels. Like a lot. I was trying to be like, don't interrupt, don't interrupt. Someone just like interject. I was like, but no, let him
Please
finish.
interrupt. Yeah.
um, but no. So you're talking about like the confidence to soft skills, but also the confidence to step out and like know like you have something to handle yourself. And I used to work with a self defense company that literally
Mm.
just taught self defense skills and self protection skills. And we worked with multitudes of groups. Sometimes we work with kids in high school. Sometimes we work with women who have been through uh, let's go with harmful situations in the past, traumatizing situations.
Yeah.
And one thing we always focus on, especially actually when dealing with women, was to give a level of confidence that they can handle the situation. And one thing I noticed, I used to get really mad when I look at people doing like women's self defense and teaching some of the most ridiculous stuff I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain point, there's a level like I think you should try and teach them the most practical thing you can in the small amount of time you have in a self defense class, because they may only be there, 1 maybe 2 days. They're not there to
Yeah.
learn martial arts. But before I understood it, I used to get mad, be like, these people can't fight. You're giving them this false confidence.
Yeah.
And then I learned that a lot of these instructors know what they're doing. The
Mm.
purpose is the confidence,
Yeah.
because the soft skills actually defeat 80% of the time. A situation that is going bad can be stopped without actually throwing a punch. It's words. It's
Sure.
here in Japan, it was a Marine, he was drunk, trying to fight me over something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Words and being able to convince his friends to step in and stop him ended that from becoming an actual fight.
Sure.
Um and but I noticed that in that conversation dealing with that Marine, my body language was unafraid. My pressure, like the way I approached it, was unafraid, because I'm like, I can't fight you if I have to. The main thing is I don't want to get sent back home to America. Like, don't get
Sure.
me
Yeah.
deported. I'm not afraid of the fight. I'm afraid of deportation.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and
And
but
yeah.
that body language affected how he responded to my soft skills.
Mhm.
And they're like, yo, man, chill out, just talking them down. And confidence is necessary. And that's something that I think, even you mentioned that the most important parts of martial arts aren't actual combat, but the ability to engage in combat if necessary makes those soft skills so much stronger.
Sure. Yeah, man. I mean, I would say it's related very much to I think combat sports honestly can be better for this than a lot of martial arts, and that just having experience being under, pressure, like intense pressure. Like
Yeah.
I've been boxing for 2 years, man. When I got to get in that ring and spar with these guys that are bigger than me, that are better than me, right? And like everywhere, right? And the whole time, it's extremely good training, right? Just for developing that composure where it's like, hey, I am under some intense pressure right now, but I'm going to keep my head cool. I'm going to do what I can, right? I'm going to remember my skills. I'm going to, I'm going to stay in it. I'm going to do the best that I can. You're learning to be calm in the eye of the storm there. And I think that, like, this is where the two come together, and they say, and this is often repeated, maybe sometimes too much, but I think there is a lot of truth to it. It's like the better that you get, like really get at martial arts, the less likely it is that you ever will really have to fight, because it's like, like you're saying, this situation you have with some Marine, it's like, some guy wants to kick my ass or something. It's like, hey, that's not a situation I want to be in, or anyone should want to be in. You know what I mean? And a lot of the time too, it's like, I'm 32 now. I turn 33 next month. I don't know. I think it's a young man type thing as well. That it's mostly young men that get into fights like that because you feel like you have something to prove to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, I don't really feel that. Maybe when I was younger, I felt it more, but it's more so that it's like, I don't want to fight or anything like that. But if somebody's threatening to kick my ass or something, it's like, oh, I'm so terrified. It's like, dude, like, you mean like in boxing last week when I got my ass kicked? It's like oh, like end of the world, right? It's like, and people, it's just about having the experience and being around enough. And listen, I'm not trying to make light of it either. Things can get life-threateningly dangerous in self-defense situations, right? You don't want to be on the ground getting kicked by five dudes. It's like that stuff happens. You don't want to be stabbed. Like that happens too. Which is one of the reasons why it's always like, hey, you should never be looking for a fight. You should always be avoiding it if you can. But having some realistic combative experience where you've been challenged and you've been hurt and you've pushed through it and you've fought through it, like this is combat sports, man. And it's great. It's the kind of thing that I think really can be a great influence for people. And I think it can make you a more confident, calmer, like person under pressure. And that's, in my opinion, what martial arts should really be about. And I'm not I'm talking a lot about how much I love combat sports right now, contrasting it with martial arts. It's obviously is a part of martial arts too. I grew up always sparring in karate, and I really appreciate that too, because it's like, even though I come from a point fighting background, sparring was always a fundamental part of what I did. It's just sparring with very restrictive rules, and that's a lot of, I'd say that might be the best way to describe my development as a martial artist, is that training with Ian showed me a different way to spar, this clinch sparring, right? And that's the real thing. It's not the applications of the forms that really changed everything for me. It was a new type of sparring that allowed me to develop new skills, right? And then what I took from that as well was, oh, well, I can learn a different type of sparring in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I can learn a different type of sparring in boxing. I did actually, before I did boxing, I did Muay Thai for a few months, but blew out my ACL. Unfortunately, it was partially torn from years of karate already, but first time doing hard sparring in Muay Thai, I blew out my ACL, unfortunately. Had to make a, adjustment. Now, that's why I've been boxing for 2 years now. And I got to tell you, by the way, I mean, Muay Thai was great. I would like to get my knee repaired and go back to it, to be honest. But I've also really enjoyed learning boxing, just kind of, and it's like for like the nerdy stuff about it too. Like I really, it's like it's a legitimate Western striking art. Like it's like, and it's kind of cool. Like as like just as an American, it's kind of cool to like be like, oh wow, there's like a deep history of this, in the culture that I'm a part of. As Westerners practicing Asian martial arts, I feel like there's always this divide, right? Where it's something, it's a product of a culture that I don't quite fully understand. Like I'm aware that I don't fully understand it. Yeah. Oh, really?
Like a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand. Boxing is probably bigger than karate, maybe.
Wow.
like
Cool.
like maybe I won't say that for Okinawa itself, but like
Sure.
there's boxing's wrestling for Japan. There's boxing high
Yeah.
school teams. It's like
Cool.
wrestling.
That's
And
interesting.
from
Yeah.
my understanding is boxing was big here like back when karate started getting big. Like it was
Yeah.
already a huge thing. So
That was something
I
that blew
think
my mind. That blew my mind
yeah,
when I learned that. Yep.
yeah. So they I think they maybe have that similar thing that, oh, it's the foreign martial art, let's learn it. Kind of similar like how
Yeah,
we
yeah.
view them, maybe they're viewing us the same way.
Yeah, so the fact that somebody explained to me once about that too, they said that there have been boxing dojos in mainland Japan longer than karate dojos,
Yeah, yeah,
which was wild.
yeah.
It's interesting. I've never heard that before, though. That's that popular. That's cool.
It's huge.
Though I
It's
knew
it,
that. Sorry.
it's
Yeah.
literally wrestling. They
Yeah.
got rid of judo was like that too, but it's been removed due to injuries, so it's still there, but not as heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But boxing, dude. So at my school, one of the schools I teach at, uh, the kid there, he lost this year, but last year he was national champion, and he's still
Mm-hmm.
Okinawan champion. Two of the Okinawan champions, I'm their teacher for English, and one of the guys second place, I'm his teacher too. Dude, they're so good. They're so
Cool.
good. The national champ, it's annoying because they'll be piecing me up, and I'm like, listen, don't go tell people at school about this. Don't go tell the other kids. Like, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, he's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And there's also just something about boxing I really appreciate is that it's just like by concentrating on one skill. It again. It's not the most practical, right? Like, and I say this all the time. And I don't have Muay Thai experience like you do, but if I had to actually fight some of these guys I box with, it's like I'd probably stay on the outside and kick them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that probably would be a good strategy. Rather, like
Yeah.
I know they're better boxers than I am. So it's not just about practicality. It's about like the elegance of it. Like there's something about being just really freaking good with your hands that
It's
is
almost
I
like
love. Yeah.
animalistic because it's the
Mm-hmm.
first outside of grabbing someone, it's the first thing you like think to do is to hit them. It almost
Yeah.
like there's something in the way in which we are designed to fight. Like I think grappling would be the first immediate response, but after that, it's just hit them with your hand. Like it's just what
Yeah.
like there's maybe something there.
Oh,
Um,
and for practicality too, it's right that probably what you're most likely to run into is somebody taking a swing at you, right? So the
yeah,
defensive skills with boxing are
yeah,
great, and then being able to hit back. But it's just about looking at this specialization versus integration type approach, right? Boxing is very specialist. It's like let's get
yeah,
really good at one thing,
yeah,
and if you're a good boxer, right, you have a skill that gives you a significant advantage over most regular people if you're talking self-defense wise, right? But there's also massive deficiencies, right? It's like, as they say, it's like a boxer isn't going to do great in MMA unless obviously they're going to have to cross train, just like, or kickboxing, something like that, right? Because there's just these whole skills that they don't address. Obviously, I think it's best to have a well-rounded approach at some level, right? I think everybody should be doing MMA to like some extent. You know what I mean? That it's like Doesn't mean you need to be an MMA fighter and you need to get in there, but I think everybody should be doing some grappling. They should have some familiarity with the broad range to be found in striking. But then there's advantages to having areas where you specialize, where it's like, yeah, I want to be a really good boxer, right? And it's, you know, once again, I don't have the obsession with self-defense that I used to. For me, a large part of the appeal of training is just out of interest, and boxing is just cool. It's like I just really enjoy it. I really enjoy that practice, but understand the more integrated practice like Muay Thai has obviously plenty of advantages as well.
Actually, Ian, I think said this too. Now that I think about it, um, what Ian's version, I believe, was that self-defense is like learning CPR,
Yep.
but martial artists are trying to be doctors.
Yeah.
Like, there's you don't need like if you learn the soft skills of self-defense, that's 80%. If you learn, like, let's be honest, I have a lot of fights.
Hmm.
It took me a while to get good,
Hmm.
longer than most. So, but that being said, like, I am confident in my ability to defend myself in in a self-defense situation against the majority of people. I've had to do it before, like I know I can do it. And so like at this point, I'm not learning to defend myself. I'm learning for the sake of mastering a specific skill set. And you talk about boxing, like boxing is like, okay, well you have your basics down. You have your CPR, you even have your basic med school. Learning to box is becoming a brain surgeon. You're going to get that one specialty. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you know, you're you may not cover everything. Like if a guy on the streets is his appendix needs removed, that may not be your thing, but you can
Yeah.
do your thing in the other area. You have your specialty, and you've already covered enough for self defense, especially if you learn those soft skills. And you also pointed out when it comes to combat sports the pressure and
Hmm.
understanding the violence of it, and I think that's another one of the huge things that people need to understand is real violence in the street is so much more aggressive and violent than anything I've ever seen trained, even in practical karate schools.
Hmm.
Unless they're going full, like I've only ever seen it in a full contact place. Like unless you're sparring full contact, you're not gonna understand the wild level of pressure and the fear response and how much that weakens your technique. Like the fear often lowers your skill level. Unless you're able to understand those things, you're not going to be able to apply it. So, technique wise, I'll say there's a lot of self defense stuff, like in my style Weishi, there's a lot of self defense things that I find superior to a lot of the stuff I actually do in combat sports. But if I
Hmm.
only ever trained Weishi the traditional way in which I train Weishi, I am significantly underprepared compared to the average just boxer or anything with that pressure because of my lack of understanding of how violent and fast and aggressive real combat can be.
Yeah.
And I will say that having that real combat sport experience and then uh, being able to now know that if someone attacks me violently on the street, I can initiate with the karate, and then if I need to switch into the Muay Thai, uh, gives a huge advantage. That's another thing. I think a lot of self defense karate systems are good in the initial part of self defense, which I say is like the first 10, 15 seconds. But then when self defense, which is like that first initial blast, you're not sure if you're fighting or not. Like, you're like, hey, we're still trying to talk this out. Wow, you got blitzed, and now you got to immediately do something. Like,
Sure.
karate has a lot of great stuff that is non-existent in sports because you're starting off in a guard, ready to go, knowing what's about to happen. Like
Yeah.
you don't have those techniques to. Oh, he's just blasting in. What do you do? I wasn't ready for it. Yada yada yada.
Hmm.
But then when you separate and you know it's a fight, a lot of the time it's better to, you know, go into your fighter stance and prepare that way, and then also be able to drop in random karate things like the illegal strikes and things like that within it.
Yeah.
Um, but that's why personally, like I said, I think blending them all is the best option. And I know that's, or even not even blending. There's a thing here, traditional Okinawan sparring,
Hmm.
karate sparring, as they call it. There's a lot of, I'm gonna call it that. There's a lot of questions about how old is it really to call it traditional and yada yada yada. But there's a style of sparring here in competition here where it's like Kyokushin, but there
Hmm.
you can grab and judo throw and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
They still don't hit to the head, but it's much more close to like how an actual fight would be, grabbing someone's shirt and trying to sweep them and stuff like that. Like that is a thing. There's a Weichi school that I visit, and their guys do that style of sparring where they'll literally it's like adding that judo throw in there or the sweep or whatever, and trying to really deal with pressure and pain and fear and overcoming those obstacles. Because without that, you don't
Yeah.
know how good you really are. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons a lot of these people are resistant is if you went through martial art never experiencing it, but you have the ego of being a master, you don't want that to be taken by
Sure.
knowing.
Yeah. No, that's a
Yeah,
big, it's like the rules don't have to be perfect, right? For you to still
yeah,
get those benefits. So like, hey, I've been put under that pressure, right? And I've pulled through, and it gives us a confidence and an ability to engage with it. Obviously it's not perfect, like not allowing strikes to the head. It's like that can be a problem a lot of time, not used to, seeing those punches, but at the same time, it's definitely gives you an advantage having some, like Kyokushin's a good example. It's like it's where,
yeah,
especially as a boxer, right? It's like a little bit like if I had to fight a Kyokushin guy, that probably would be my approach, right? It's like I'm gonna do the thing he doesn't do. I'll concentrate on that, right? But like at a certain point, we're like drawing straws here. Like it doesn't have to always be a my style is better than your style, whatever. Like the point is, all the respect in the world to Kyokushin. Those guys definitely are tough as hell. They're challenging themselves, they're putting themselves into a position where they're developing that composure under pressure. And like that is the most important thing. It's like it's also often just what's missing. It's one of the problems a lot with point karate. It's that I think point karate can develop that to a certain point, but the rules are so restrictive, and it's like, you know something about, and it's interesting to compare like the Shotokan Kyokushin Japanese karate divide. Shotokan, like style competition, theoretically it would be more realistic, right? They allow more, but at the same time I would probably say Kyokushin style sparring is going to be better just because it is, full contact, right? It's like it's one of those things where it is an intensity to it that I think probably more closely resembles like self defense and like fighting, the kind of skills you're going to need for that, rather than something that's a little bit too refined. Of course, I'm painting with a wide brush here. At the end of the day, I mean, like even when I say there's range to be found in these arts. If you watch like old school Shotokan, those guys definitely were beating the crap out of each other. But then, fast forward to like the Olympics a few years ago with it too. That's, yeah, it's a very different thing. And a point that you were bringing up before, I think that's important to address is that, with a lot of these traditional martial arts, like there are some legitimate differences between self-defense and combat sports that we can address. It's like the role that endurance plays, for instance.
yeah,
um with my experiences in boxing, it's a fundamental difference. A lot of what my coach is doing in my training sessions is preparing you to go the distance. You know what I mean? You're fighting in combat sport. You're fighting exhaustion often as much, if not more so, than you're fighting your opponent, right? I mean, it's a big thing. It's like I remember hearing Benny the Jet talk about this in an interview. I'm familiar with him, old school American kickboxer. Correct. Yeah, he's great. I love Benny the Jet. But he would talk about how it's like, I don't even get started till round three. It's like everything, it's just feeling them out until round three. Then I'll go. It's like, this is a very big thing. This is a strategy that comes in combat sports, is that outlasting your opponent, right? Waiting for them to be tired and then having that reserve where it's like, all right, now I'm going to turn it up on him. That can be a really good strategy in the ring, right? Doesn't make sense at all for self-defense, right? You're not going multiple rounds, like by definition in self-defense. Self-defense is now, right? It's like, it's very immediate. And that is a legitimate difference, right? A lot, and this is one of the things where you can give the devil its due with, traditional martial arts and karate and how they compare to combat sports or stuff like that. You could say that a lot, if somebody who's very good in a traditional style, it's like, yeah, they're going to lose 99 out of 100 times to a good combat sport player in that role for reasons like that. It's like, yeah, they're going to gas on you. You know what I mean? It's like they're not going to be able to last. They haven't been in this situation. They don't understand the strategy around really taking somebody out, in the ring like that. It's like, yeah, I don't even, I even in, I haven't competed, but even just in sparring in my boxing classes, if I do 4 rounds with a guy, like, there's a different approach you got to take to all 4 of those rounds, and a lot of it is energy conservation. And this is a huge part of the game that just is not really relevant in self-defense, right? The other one you were talking about, that's an important one, is this concept of preemption and of you not really knowing when the fight is on, right? It's like, that's like, these are a lot of the rule, people misunderstand a lot of time to think that's like, when people will say, it's like, oh, I don't train, with there's no rules in the streets. It's like, I'll gouge your eyes out. It's like, I'll just bite you if you grab me. It's like, that's the stuff that doesn't really matter. It's not about eye gouges, and it's not about biting. It's like, the rules that do matter, though, are things like that. It's like, okay, we're going for rounds here, right? What does that mean? That means, okay, I know it's time to fight because the bell rings. It's like, okay, we don't have that in self-defense. And that is an important difference, right? And we also know it's like, hey, we're going multiple rounds here. I need to have some kind of a strategy with the way I'm going to conserve my energy and the way I'm going to tire my opponent out. And, I'm not going to go for a knockout right away. It's like, I'm going to wait until he starts to show signs of that exhaustion. And I'm going to keep my energy, right? And that's when I'm going to turn it up on him. Right? All of this stuff is like fundamental. This is what makes it work in the ring a lot of time. It doesn't, right? So, to it, like, I would, and this is where I've gone with it a lot, is that the problem with a lot of martial arts and a lot of self-defense based stuff is people want to pretend like it's totally different. Like, there's nothing else. Like, hey, there is a perspective that is true. And I'll push back. And a lot of people in the practical karate world, I kind of would push back against some of the rhetoric that gets thrown around with that too. It's like, fighting is fighting. You know what I mean? It's like, there's no shortcut. There's no way around it. It's like, if you want to learn how to fight, you got to do it. Like, and this is the whole thing about, like, hey, martial artists should respect fighters, because it's like, and the longer I'm in combat sports, the more evident this seems to me, is that it's like, yeah, there's a level of intensity that you get in your boxing gym with guys, you guys even just getting ready for amateur competition, that you would be hard pressed to find in the karate world. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It certainly does, but it's not the norm. It is the norm in boxing. It's not the norm, in the karate world, right? But at the same time, there are some very specific things that we can address for self-defense that are just not going to be a part of combat sports. So, things like having a strategy for dealing with the initial stages of the confrontation. And this is stuff Ian, and of course, a lot of people talk about, and it's all really important, good stuff for people to understand. There's a verbal aspect to this confrontation that precedes any kind of physical fighting. Right? You need to have a strategy that makes sense to that. And my friend, I think actually you guys connected in one of my posts, my friend Andrew, who's also an Oichi Ryu guy, he was talking to me about once how, like Abernethy is one of his teachers, a guy named Jeff Thompson, whose stuff is great. Absolutely. Yeah, I love Jeff Thompson's books. His book on the fence in particular is a great one. His videos on the fence are great. But the fence position is just, this way of holding his hands and this way of preparing himself for, self-defense type situation. He's putting himself in a position where
The way she stance.
exactly, yeah, and that's
fence.
what Andrew says. Like Weichi, this is our basic, ready position, and it makes sense, right? So you don't need this for a boxing match or a Muay Thai fight or an MMA fight, right? But it's just like the moment that somebody's getting aggressive with you and you feel threatened by them, just hands are up and like, yo, man, I don't want to fight. Let's just go our separate ways. We don't need to do this, right? These are skills that I can see from the combat sports side of things. It's easy maybe for people to be a little bit dismissive of it. But I think especially for your average practitioner in martial arts, I think it's important that, and as a teacher too, it's like you talk about these things and you make sure people understand. It's like, yeah, you need to have this sense of awareness that before any blows are thrown, but you're just threatened by somebody, how do you handle yourself? How do you position yourself in a way that, because you don't want to fight and you shouldn't want to fight, right? But how do I position myself in a way where I'm prepared? Where if this guy's about to take a swing at me, he's not going to catch me with that sucker punch, right? That's something that's unique to the practice that we don't need in combat sports. And then the other side of it, the negative aspect of it, all the time that has to be spent in combat sports, just physically preparing yourself for the endurance of it. It's like we don't really need that in self-defense. So then you start to see how it's like there is a legitimate role, I think, especially for the, average people. They aren't looking for competition, aren't looking, for stuff like that. They like, hey, martial arts are cool. I want to learn them. I'm interested in this, which is fine, right? And I want to feel. I want to have something that makes me feel like I can really handle myself, right? That I can defend myself. It's like, okay, we don't need to develop your endurance. We don't need to, but we need to have some preemptive skills, and you need to be able to handle yourself. You need to be able to hit. You need to be able to throw a good strike. You need to be able to you know what it's like to be put under pressure and to have somebody trying to hurt you and to stay calm and to defend yourself intelligently despite that. And that's what's missing a lot, I think, from traditional karate. You're not going to get that just from drill and kata and just from doing, prearranged kumite and even from hitting the makiwara or pads or stuff like that. It's like you're only going to get that from intensive sparring,
Which the issue is that intensive sparring a lot of times well, there's a different level of endurance between sparring and competition itself, but sparring will up your endurance to a point that I think is beneficial even for self-defense. Because like I said, self-defense might last 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes if it's really long. And like that's
Sure.
really long for self-defense.
Yeah.
And like you can get enough endurance for that just out of the sparring. You don't have to go through a whole fight camp level
Yeah.
of endurance and stuff. Um, One thing I was saying too, you talked about sports guys like not respecting things like the fence. Like
Sure.
I'll do this, and I remember I've tried to show this to guys in the Muay Thai world, and some get it and they actually really like it,
Yeah.
and others, like I said before, if they did karate before as a kid or whatever, and they have this preconceived notion of what karate is, they're like, you're just that none of that makes sense, or they're very resistant.
Close-minded. Yeah.
Closed-minded. But one thing you'll notice is like, say you look at a weigh-in, how many? Now, obviously it's a weigh-in. You want to sell a fight, so there's a little bit of flair and extra to it. But how many of these guys get sucker punched or pushed at a weigh-in and fall
Sure.
over?
Yeah.
Get kicked because they're not like. That's how I've seen guys who are fighters get into altercations in the street. The fact that even happens lets you know there's a gap in the self-defense thought process.
Sure.
But like I've seen, like, okay, if they think it might actually happen, hands up, okay, they're ready. It is what it is. But like sometimes they'll do the whole chest up, get in the face thing, and I'm like, are you stupid?
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
if the guy hits hard, he could have 1% of your actual ability. But if he hits hard and you let him sucker punch you, it's over.
Yeah, that's Jeff
And it's
Thompson's
like,
whole thing. That's his whole thing. Is like, hey, if you're, and it's interesting too because I've heard so many. I know if you said you're familiar with Jeff Thompson, his whole preemptive striking type thing
yeah,
is you put yourself in a position where you set up an easy shot, It's not. A lot of martial artists see that and they hate it so much. Like, so you're just practicing to sucker punch the guy, and I'm like,
Yes.
yes,
That's
like it
yes.
works. It
Absolutely.
works, you know. And it's like
Absolutely.
this is it. And again, something with self defense that does matter with it too is that it's like, yo, man, if somebody puts me in a position where they're forcing me to hit them, I don't owe them a fair fight, right?
Yeah.
And I have no
Yeah.
reason to think they're going to give me a fair fight.
Yes.
You know, it's
Yes.
like, does this guy have a knife? I don't know.
Yes.
Right? You don't know anything about him. This isn't a match. You know what I mean? Or his
Yes.
buddy's going to jump in, or you're going to end up on the ground getting the shit kicked out of you by like 5 dudes. Like, people die that way.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to have a self-defensive aspect of your training, you should take it seriously. And that's why people will be like, there's just, and I've tried to talk to many people about it, and they just have an emotional reaction to it. They're like, I'm not going to practice a sucker punch. You know, that's for cowards a little bit. And it's like, man, you know, you're like, I'm not practicing this. I'm just going to go around like knocking people out to like make myself feel tough. It's like, I'm imagining a situation where like my life is literally in danger, and I will take whatever advantage I can to do so. You know what I mean? And it's one of those. Sorry, please go.
Fair fight. I was gonna say, is knowing you fought a fair fight gonna help you if you're dead?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I'd rather be the guy who sucker punched him in the lid. Like, you know, like. Yeah.
Nah, and it is one of those things where, and you're talking about like, are fighters prepared for that? You know, listen, all the respect in the world to fighters, and you know, I'm sure many of them are. They're like, many of them would have that attitude, like, you better hope that sucker punch works, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, if it don't, I am way overqualified for this situation, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? And I get that too. You know, like, I think it's important not to fall into these things that's just like, yeah, you know, I can't fight in the ring at all, but my sucker punch is excellent. It's like, okay. You know, it's like, I think it's good to, at the end, you know, to be well-rounded at the end of like, that's always my thing. There's a pet peeve that I have with a lot of the martial arts world and even the practical karate world, is that it's like, hey, there's no shortcuts. You want to learn how to fight, you got to do it the same way everybody else does, through hard, you know, that hard training that you do. That said, there are some specific things we should practice that are relevant specifically to self-defense. You know what I mean? I used to be, which I think is still the prevailing, you know, the common attitude in the practical karate community. I used to kind of have more of this attitude than like fighting, self-defense, totally different things. Anymore, I'm kind of like, even for the practical good stuff, in order to make it work, you have to have that baseline fighting ability. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's the big thing that people miss in this community a lot of the time. And obviously not everyone misses it, but for many people, you know, it's kind of a insidious thing about martial arts. You know, everybody's looking for that kind of like easy answer, that, you know, like that shortcut that gets you there. And it's like, there's no shortcuts. You know, it's like, I think that you have to develop the fighting ability, but then there's levels to it. It's like, you don't have to be like a world-class competitor, you know, with it. It's like, but you have to have you need to be a competent fighter. And then if you do train for self-defense, then then you supplement that with self-defense specific training. And I do think that puts you in a better place, even than a better fighter than you, right? Because it's like, hey, yeah. Yeah.
Specifically know that is timing, precision, knowing how to aim, knowing how to throw properly, all that kind of stuff. Knowing you can parry a full speed punch, which a lot of karate guys think they can really do and maybe necessarily can't when it's coming at you for real, especially if they throw more than one. And one thing that I know I can do is, I know even against guys who are high level pros, I can block your jab. Like I know I can
Sure.
cover enough to get into the dirty, nasty areas we often talk about. One thing that you get a lot with the practical karate guys are this is actually so impractical. I don't even like. It's hard to even like. I'll just poke you in the eye, like, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I'll throw a jab with my fingers out. Like, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, that's the
like,
best way to put it. That's like I saw somebody said that in my group a few months ago. I thought it was a great way to put it. They're just like, if you think you can put your the tip of your finger into somebody's eye just easily, but you cannot jab their entire face with your fist,
yeah,
you're delusional, right?
you're delusional.
It's
Yeah,
like it's that
yeah,
simple, right? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's a good example, right? We tend to like, and people tend to concentrate on technique a lot. That's just like, well, I just gouge his eyes, and it's like, man, and I
Get
get
to
like,
that.
you have the ability, like, do you have the like that is some extreme accuracy. You can get the fingertips, the eye, right? That, you know what I mean? It's like it's not as easy, and that's the problem with self-defense. A lot of the time, we create this imaginary, untestable scenario where it's just like, have you ever done it before? It's like, well, of course not. I'm not gonna eye gouge my training partners, you psycho. It's like, but why do you assume that you're gonna be able to pull this off for the first time ever when you are under duress, like actively being attacked? This is your time for
Yeah.
it's like, so, and again, this is something that Ian talks about, a great one of his. He says that safety in your training enables you to be a more effective fighter because you're practicing safer, because the things that you're practicing are not as dangerous. You're able to you're able to get a lot of experience actually using them against a resistant partner, right? In sparring. So that makes it so it's like, I will take the boxer with a good jab over some self-defense guy that does eye gouges all day, right?
So can't just open his fingers.
Of
Like the
course, yeah,
boxer doesn't
yeah,
have enough knowledge to just jab with the finger out.
yeah,
It's crazy.
sure.
It's crazy to me. Um,
I'm
and
sorry,
again, as you were
can
saying,
we just take a break? Just run to the
continue.
bathroom real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
All right, so right here in this little intermission, this is just a quick reminder to please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and follow along for more practical martial art skills, martial art interviews, and pretty much anything involving the martial art world. All right, guys, let's get back to the interview. All right. Oh,
We were just talking about finger jabs, jabs,
oh yeah.
and that was
Oh
the
yeah.
way it's put to me. I think it was great that it's just like, listen, it's not that putting like a finger jab to the eye doesn't work. It does, right? But if you can't jab somebody's entire face with your fist, right, shouldn't have any reason to believe you're going to be able to, accurately get your finger into their eye. Mm-hmm.
But my first opponent, like he threw a lot of strikes to my head, and not trying to overly hype, but he missed a lot. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
actually easy when you go up against someone else who's trained. I remember a few years ago, this is wild, maybe 5 years ago, I was going up against a very high level boxer, and he was jabbing me now, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I know how to block the jab, but it just didn't make sense. Everything's hitting me, and then I throw at him, and I can never touch him. And now that
Yeah.
I've been doing it a bit longer, it's the same. I know guys will come up and try and hit me with the jab, and it's like they're like, "Why can't I touch you?"
Yeah.
And it's like people don't understand that there's levels, there's huge skill gaps if you've never learnt the timing. There's huge things about like how your shoulder and your elbow and your body movements can telegraph a punch to a guy who knows what he's doing, how it's simply not gonna hit, and that includes an eye gouge. And
Mm-hmm.
to think that I remember people like, oh well, if we're doing jiu-jitsu, I'll just bite or whatever. It's like you're talking about breaking rules. This guy can kill you with rules. He can break the same rules you can break. So
Yeah.
it's no longer an advantage if he can break them and can still kill you with the rules. It's just, if anything, that puts it closer to that guy's favor if he has enough wherewithal to move out of his rule set. So,
Yo, sorry, man. My alarm just went off, and I don't know if it just reset the recording, but
no, no, you're good. You're there.
I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think this is just such a fundamental thing, is that combat sports, it's just better understood by necessity that you have to do things live. You have to have that experience making it work, and with traditional martial arts, traditional, that that's the biggest issue that we see sometimes is just this attitude that it's like I can just practice it for decades, for years, in the kata or in the, prearranged kumite or, yeah, and it will magically, happen. And it's just, so we were talking.
It's just dumb.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I have a theory about that too. It's like, no, the earliest reference that we have to that kind of training is from a 1905 training manual from the Okinawan school system, written by Chomo Hanashiro, who was a direct student of Itosu. He was one of the first people that taught karate in the schools. Right. Yeah. And in this manual, it describes something that sounds a lot like prearranged kumite. And that's the earliest reference in the historical record that you have to that type of training. And I don't think it existed before then. I think that was created. It's a matter of debate among historians, what the traditional sparring was like, originally, not even in karate. This would have been todi, like in real, like indigenous Okinawan martial arts, what sparring was like. I know you're familiar with Noah Legel and, the work that he's done with Kakademeshi. It's like there are references to this practice called Kakademeshi that sounds a lot like sparring based on what people said about it, but we don't really have too much like proof of it. A lot of it's after the fact, like accounts, people talking about it, like, oh, my teacher did this, and they're saying this, they're talking about something that happened 50 years ago. It makes sense to me though, that you had some, and I don't know if it was super realistic or what, there's no way of saying, but it makes sense to me that there was some kind of sparring practice originally in the art. But then the karate that spread across the world eventually, though, was this karate that was developed in the school system. It was highly influenced by what was done in the school system. And I get the impression that this prearranged kumite was invented as a safer alternative, right, to any kind of real sparring, which would make sense. You're teaching in a school, they didn't want, these kids like doing something potentially dangerous. It was just physical education to them. But they probably appreciated that it's like, yeah, but we can't just do kata. It's like we need something here. So I think that was the original idea behind that stuff. It will bridge the gap. This will be close enough. It will give them some ability to actually use what they're practicing. I would agree with you, though, that, in looking at it now, I think that it's just not good training. It just isn't. It just doesn't accomplish any sort of goal. And it's the kind of thing I wouldn't spend any time practicing. Yeah, I can hear you. And I have a thing in the corner, too. It says it's counting, but it's 4 minutes into a new recording.
Yeah, I hope it's just that my recording thing's not showing my sound, but if you can hear me, I'm hoping it.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have. It's interesting as we talk about the point sparring, because even with my Weichi has a lot of kumite, prearranged kumite, and it's interesting
Yeah.
because even in that situation, we'll talk about what is it supposed to be doing, timing and all this. I'm like, well, this timing's wrong, and like all
Yeah.
like, but it's interesting because like while my instructor will say these things like what it's supposed to be teaching, another class will come by and they're like, listen, I know it's not great for time, but try to find something useful. Like,
Ah.
try your best to find something. I'm
Yeah.
like, so
I know, yeah.
this is
Square peg, round hole type stuff,
yeah,
is just, yeah, you gotta, and it's funny, that's a justification I hear all the time. That it's just like, and it's like, I guess because people consider it traditional,
yeah,
but like, you have to make it work. It's on us. It's our responsibility. Like, you can't call something bad.
I'm
It's
like,
like
yes, I
you have
can.
to make, you have to, yeah, it's like you have to make it work. And like, that attitude anymore just drives me crazy. You know, for instance, I've been made a lot of posts in my group recently about Motobu, and
Yeah.
I've been diving into Motobu again. And for anybody who isn't familiar, Motobu Choki, you know, is in the practical karate community is often considered like the prime example of karate's practical roots. That you had this guy named Motobu, you know, he was a contemporary of Funakoshi. He also taught karate in Japan. You know, he's from Okinawa and taught karate in Japan early on, the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s. And, you know, when I look at what Motobu does, I'm like, some of it's good, you know, and I do think that when you look at his stuff, that he was a guy who had more practical experience, certainly than somebody like Funakoshi. And I get the impression that Funakoshi didn't have like any real. I think karate to him was just like kata and makiwara and then compliant drills. You know, like I think that's the way that he was taught, and that's certainly the way that he taught. Motobu, I think, was a guy, and it's verifiable that he had more practical experience. But when you look at the actual drills that he does, there's a lot in there that's just kind of nonsensical. You know, some of it's good, you know, and some of it doesn't really make sense as well. And it's always just this one of these things that it shouldn't be controversial to say that. Like, I really like Motobu. I'm not like trying to, you know, talk smack on the guy with a little bit. I just think that for his time and place, you know, he was trying to like create a system. Yeah, I think people really underestimate how difficult it is to make like a methodology for teaching somebody to fight. You know what I mean? Like these things don't just like exist out of nowhere. You know, like my boxing coach, for instance, you know, he was not starting from square one when he came up with his teaching methods. You know, like these things, this was something that was built and, you know, was given to him. Yeah, and then he adds his own ideas to it, I'm sure, like we all do. What I see in even a guy like Motobu is supposed to be like the best example from the early written record of karate of somebody doing something more practical. To me, like even Motobu is like mixed. It's like some things are good, some things not so good, you know. And that's understandable when you look at the historical context. You know, like we don't really know what karate was like prior to the 1900s. We have very, you know, and interestingly, it's like the kata themselves really are like the biggest thing that we have, right? You know, that in terms of a like historical record, like we know the kata was there, we know they had makiwara, we know they lifted weights, they did a lot of things to strengthen their body. There's some interesting accounts that talk about practices like kakedameshi, which sounded a lot like sparring. You know, we do hear about challenge matches too, about guys, you know, fighting each other. But what was it really like, you know, prior to that? And I think people tend to assume that it was this highly developed, like really effective self-defense system or fighting system when it seems pretty evident to me, you know, it was pretty rough around the edges. You know, you got tough guys like Motobu that had been in some fights and definitely, you know, knew a little bit of something about what they were doing. But he didn't have like a system of teaching it. You know, it's like he had what everybody else had, which is he had this traditional kata based training method that was a lot about strengthening the body, you know, with what these people had available to them. And you know, hitting the makiwara and lifting weights and stuff like that. You know, like this. I just think that I made this point in one of my recent posts. I thought it was a really good way to put it. Was just that karate guys have a unhealthy obsession with the past sometimes. You know, where we look for things in the past that probably didn't exist and yet can be easily found in the present. You know, it's like I need to justify this old karate stuff as practical self-defense when it's like, well, we don't really know that. You know, we're speculating a lot as to what that training was actually like and, you know, what kata was actually for. And yet, if you want practical self-defense, we can find it in the present day,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
pretty easily. So that's been a big one for me, you know, even talking about applications and bunkai. I know bunkai is a butchered word in the West, you know, the way that we generally use it in a Western context is not that term's actual meaning. But for all intents, but we're talking about kata applications.
And they actually they still use the word here in Japan, even though it is
Oh,
technically
really?
not like it's
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
so a lot of the stuff that we in America like it's a butchered word. Again, we talk about like how we look at things. Like yeah,
Hmm.
it's a technically a butchered word, but like I don't even know if we're the ones who butchered that. If the Japanese decided to butcher it first,
Yeah, that's okay.
like
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
like technically from a linguistic standpoint, you're correct. But
Yeah.
like, how many words do we say in English that are technically not the word, but we use the
Sure.
new way?
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, well, my understand literal meaning of bunkai is pretty much just like analysis, So if
yes,
you're
yes,
analyzing moves so that can mean just like physically breaking down the way that you're doing the movements. But yeah,
yeah,
like, but anyway, it's all beside the point. It's that this obsession, and I'm not trying. And listen, I'm not being critical of others because this is me. I'm the Nahachi project
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I'm the
like this
same. I'm the same.
obsession with like coming up with a way of like making Nahachi into like a practical self-defense system. I mean, like and there certainly is something to that. I do think when I look specifically at the movements of Nahachi that there is a logical progression to the movements and that there are things there that make sense and that you can take from it. At the same time though, this is highly speculative. It's like nothing, we can't say any of that for certain, right? And at the end of the day, what really develops practical ability isn't just analyzing it and being like, yeah, I'm splitting somebody's guard, taking the inside and hitting them with an elbow. It's like, that's legit. That's great. That's good stuff, right? But even if you like take something like a practical thing and apply it to the kata, that still doesn't give you practical ability. What gives you practical ability is sparring and pad work. It's like the same thing it always does. So I do think that because we're nerds, it's like for fun and interest, it's like it's fun to like look at these old forms and to analyze them and to speculate about what they could be used for, which is great. But it's not real training. Like real training is the same way it's always done. You gotta get in there, you gotta grab a hold of each other, and you gotta try to make it work.
But if I wanted to learn the fighting aspects within karate like deeply, and that was my only focus, is purely just how to fight using karate moves. If I just learned all of Muay Thai and all of Judo, I got all of it. Like
Sure.
that's most like not all of it, but that'd be 80% mastered.
Yeah.
Like if you had Judo and Muay Thai, so it's like I
Yeah.
look at it and again, we talk about it like we've passed at a certain point when it comes to what we're doing. Like I'm the same as you. I love breaking down the kata, but I understand that a lot of that comes to the love of the history and the culture, and it is a passion project as much as it is a martial journey. Like I said, if I only wanted to learn to fight, I have enough self defense skills that I understand how to defense, and I understand. I taught how to verbally de
Hmm.
escalate with security, and like I have that like if I
Yeah.
just wanted that, the best way to improve because of where I'm at right now would be increase some verbal stuff and more combat sports because that first I'm good on a lot of the other stuff, but I stay
Yeah.
there because of again becoming the brain surgeon. Like yes, I have my basic medical license, but I'm trying to become that brain surgeon in those
Sure.
areas, and that's what we've chosen to
Yeah.
do. Um, and I think it's as we talk about like our love for that kata because it goes so far back, and I do believe like a lot of it was adjusted within the school system, and a lot of it was lost. But I also think that it's important to recognize, as you mentioned before when you talk about Motobu, the time frames in which these things are done, and how you can find it better here. And one of the reasons you can find it better here is due to technology's improvement in our communication. Like
Hmm.
as the simple thing of the difference between how martial arts would have grown to when they could have actually publicized books widely and
Hmm.
actually like just with pictures compared to now we have freaking YouTube. Like like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you look at a style like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and where it was 20 years ago to now because it developed with with videos every time something new works, they take it immediately. Like it
Yeah.
heeds, like they don't hold in something that traditional stuff does. We hold to wanting to stick directly to the tradition, and we don't, when something new works, we don't just take it, and that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And I when you look at like someone like Multiple, he doesn't have YouTube to help him. He doesn't
Yeah.
have a competition organization like K1 or UFC to go compete and consistently improve his skills. If he's fighting outside of challenge matches, he may be sparring his own students, which who knows that skill level gap. There's this
Sure.
phrase like, if you're good enough, you can make anything work. I can do stupid stuff from comic
Sure.
book shows against someone who's really worse than me because my timing's just that much better. So
Yeah.
most like most of who may be looking like, oh, this works. I'm like, it would never work if he was anywhere near your skill level. It only works
Yeah.
if you're a
And
student.
we don't really know what sparring was like in Motobu school. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And we don't really, and you also have this like everybody loves Motobu, myself included. Motobu is a fascinating historical figure. Right? Let's be real though, he had one win in the ring and I think one loss. It was like 1-1. He apparently had a lot of street fights, and some challenge matches
need a
here or
street
there.
fight.
But it's like it's one of those things where it's like let's just like take Motobu and put him into the present. It's like you have a guy who's 1-1, like verifiable in some way. Talks a lot about fights he was in like 20 freaking years. You gotta remember he was like 65
Yeah,
when in his books. He was an older guy. So like these were fights that he had probably decades ago for
yeah,
the most part. There was some challenge matches. There's that very famous incident where he had an altercation with Funakoshi.
yeah.
That's not very like impressive by
That's
today's
not impressive at
standards.
all.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
impressive at
it's
all.
like that was only impressive at the time based on how little experience everybody else in the karate world seemed to have. It's like he and his time, he was the big, like he was like the best karate fighter ever is what many people would call him, and like that was his record. How you break it down?
That, and this is what I remember talking about. He's like, well, the old masters, and again, this I think has to do with Asian culture, or I won't say all Asia, but I know China, Japan. They have this culture where you look to your ancestors
Mm-hmm.
for the like they all the answers are with your ancestors, not in the future. And the West is different. We're like, look toward the future. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
funny. I think a lot of us who aim toward karate, we have this fascination with that Asian culture. Maybe some of that thought process seeps into us through movies, so whatever it is. And because I
yeah.
remember talking to my friends, like, well, the ancient masters, and they must have known better. And in my head, as I grew, I'm like, why do I think that an ancient master with less communication, less fight
Mm-hmm.
experience because he didn't have combat sports, unless he was an actual soldier, in which case the soldier may have gone to war and fought many battles, whatever. But like outside of people like Miyamoto Musashi, who out here is pulling out 50 fights like Mayweather, like how many of those people really
Sure.
existed? And there's nothing wrong with these people creating a martial art style, but the way in which we put it in amber and we isolate it like a fossil and don't want to evolve it, it's like, well, you're freezing a martial art style from a guy who has 3 4 fights, and it's like that's a good place to start if you don't have any fights yourself. But if you don't
Sure. Yeah.
consistently evolve it with what you learn from your own, then it's just a guy with 3 or 4 fights making a system.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, every other guy who owns a gym in Oakland has more experience than the guy who created your system.
Definitely. Yeah, man. And so this is what you're talking about. It's like he doesn't have video available to him, right? Or
Yeah,
like the internet, where we like literally have this massive amount. There's no such thing as the UFC,
yeah,
as MMA. You know, there's interestingly enough, Muay Thai, like those guys were already like straight up kickboxing at this time,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Like we
yeah.
see that footage, it's like, and you have to wonder, how much cross influence there could have been there. But
Oh, hopefully the 1600s they had connections between ancient
mhm,
Siam and Okinawa,
sure,
and the
yeah,
Ryukyu Kingdom. So I do believe that there. I am one of the people, and I know I'm not the only one who does believe there was a connection there. martial.
Oh yeah, you know,
But
I mean, and even where Okinawa is situated, it's kind of a crossroads. It's this island, you know, in the middle of the Sea of Japan. It's where
yeah,
people would stop, you know, on their way to other places often, you
yeah,
know. So I think that it probably has there's probably something to that. This idea that the Okinawan martial tradition kind of is somewhat unique compared to other places, just because they had a lot of these cultural influences from other places. It was an island, you know. It was a
ancient here in
Yeah,
museums and
isn't that
everything.
crazy?
So it's
Cool.
like,
Yeah, really cool stuff.
yeah, it's like the people misunderstand how that kind of connection reaches all the way through. So yeah,
Sure. Yeah, but just to delve, because I've been delving into Mozabu a lot lately. You know, I'll give you an example too. I've talked about in my group recently. I posted a picture from one of Motobu's books of him doing a shuto, a knife hand. It was like grabbing with one side and doing a knife hand to the ribs or to the liver. And, you know, it was obviously a static drill. You know, the guy is just standing
yeah,
there, a puncher, and Motobu's in like a proper horse stance with his arm fully extended, and he's grabbing and hitting. And, you know, somewhat was looking for controversy a little bit. I kind of made the point where it was like, if it was just a random modern practitioner demonstrating this, nobody would take notice. Everybody would be like, you know, it doesn't really make sense. But because it's Motobu, and I was proven right with the responses, like everyone's going to want to justify this. Everyone's going to want to be like, no, it does work. I'm like, and fair enough. Listen, you know, I'm not saying that you cannot theoretically make a knife hand strike to the liver work. Probably can, you know. Yeah, it's not, it's out there. You know what I mean? Definitely not. You know what I mean? All right, but then I contrasted it. And Motobu also has a technique that he shows, actually in a different book, in an earlier book, but that I think is a good one, and one that I've used in my sparring a lot, where you kind of just trap the arm on the opposite side and you just hit him with a right straight, right? And it's like, and it's one of those things where it's like, you can speculate and you can be like, you know, shuto to the body, it actually does work, and here's my complex justification as to why. And I'm like, but it's like nobody needs to do that with a fist to the jaw. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things, because it's evident, right? It is so easy to find an example of something like this working, right? You suppress one arm, hit him with your closed
yeah,
fist to their jaw with the other arm, right?
yeah,
Nobody's going to argue whether or not that works, because we can
yeah.
find examples of it in competition. We can find examples of it in sparring. You can probably find examples of it in street fights. Definitely can find examples of
Yeah,
it in street fights, right? It's
yeah,
everywhere, right?
yeah,
So that's something Motobu did that was good, right? When everybody else was just, you know, in karate books at the time, just always pulling back and doing nothing with this arm. You know,
well,
he has partner drills where it shows him doing stuff like you know, good, but then he like, and I like, this is just something that I've done for years. I know a lot of other people do. Is like, we can just zero in on everything Motobu does that's good, and
yeah,
there are things in his drills that are good. But it's good sometimes too to also acknowledge that there's some stuff that's way questionable as
yeah,
well. You know, like the shuto to the body. It's like, and people always will accuse me of just like, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's impractical. You know, you gotta be more.
below 5%. like,
Mm-hmm.
like you don't need
Yeah,
to be. Yeah, yeah. You can explain how 5% of the time it can work. That is
yeah,
so low of a percentage. We shouldn't be drilling it.
sure.
Like,
Yeah, man. Well, this is the thing, and you're talking about skill difference. Is like, being able to make it work does not make it practical. You know,
yeah,
and this is a
yes,
big thing for me as a teacher, is that I might be able to pull like, so something like a shuto to the body. I bet, especially from working with some teenagers, you know, kids without much experience, I could probably make that work against my students.
yeah,
I have no doubt. I'm sorry. I have no confidence at all that they could make it work against me. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
that's like the perfect. And for me, it's like for instance, things that are good. I know because they have made it work that I have students that can elbow my head. You know, they can split my guard and they can hit me with an elbow.
Uh,
That's my interpretation of that movement from Nahachi. Sounds good, right? I know students that can suppress my arm and punch me in the
Hachi.
face. They've done that to me, right? You know, it's like, but then you like, it's just an interesting thing with the karate community. And this idea repeatedly comes up that they're like, it's up to you to adapt it and make it work. You can't just say, Shuto to the body is nonsense. Like, not worth your time. You should spend your time practicing better things. It's like, Motobu didn't have the advantage that you and I have of being like, can you find any video of somebody making this work in competition? I'm just like, can you cross like, forget? Because Motobu, I guess, could have done it with his, and that's always the question. It's like, why is Motobu showing this in his books if it doesn't really work even in training? And, the human body is the
Do we know
constant
if it?
here.
Do we know if it did? Again, we don't know the skill level of his students. I
Sure.
could make
Yeah.
that work against some people. I know
Yeah.
some people I could pull that, but again, it's like I couldn't pull it off against the other fighters. But we already
Yeah.
know he was the top fighter with what, 2 fights? How many other fighters was he practicing with? Was he fighting
Exactly.
with guys who? And there's more people who. Well, I don't want to say more people who train, but there's more people who train casually now outside because like we don't
Mhm.
have a warrior class the same way. But there's more people who train casually now than they did back then. Like
Sure.
it's not hard. Like it's going to be much easier for us to end up against someone who how do I phrase this? It's very easy for a teacher of a higher skill level to do crazy things against a student, and so
Yeah.
he may even truly believe it worked. If he did it 5, 6 times against the students, he may actually believe it worked because he wasn't able
Sure.
to fully pressure test it. And I think
Yeah.
one thing that we do again with the whole idea of looking toward the past and idolizing the ancestors versus the West, one thing I'll notice is, and again I think Ian brought this up, um, you can respect past masters and recognize faults. Let's be honest, how many ancient scientists that we respect highly for being geniuses would sound like flat earthers now?
Sure.
Are
Yeah.
like
Like
you'd
all of them,
have
right?
like
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yes. Like all of
like
it.
all of them.
Yeah, it's like that's the nature of it work because it's science is always moving, right? And this is
Yeah.
actually I don't know if you're familiar with Combat Self Defense YouTube channel, a guy named Roland. Sorry, Rob, if I messed up your name, but he runs a really good YouTube channel. I like his stuff. He's he's a karate guy originally that does Muay Thai like you. He
Okay.
but he had a really good video where he talked about how calling it a martial art, these terms we come up with, it's not that it's like totally inaccurate to say martial art, but it's like it matters what you mean by art. It's not like painting a picture. And he makes the argument that it would be better if we called it martial science, right? That's because that's what these really are. It's like a science of it. Like you have a hypothesis, shuto to the body. My hypothesis is that if I grab with one arm and pull him into it, and then shuto his ribs, that's a good technique that will work. It's like if we're artists, it's like we just preserve it in amber and like look at this beautiful technique that Motobu does, so cool. If we're scientists, we're like, okay, that's an interesting hypothesis. Let's test it and let's see if it works. And it's like it's always about like the way that you approach it. Like I definitely am more of a and if you're claiming to do anything practical, you should be more of a martial scientist,
Scientists than
really,
you
than
are.
a martial
Yeah.
artist. You know what I mean? But we just use these terms for like
The,
even martial art. It's like Budo and martial art are not equivalent terms. They're like it's just
yeah.
kind of a Western translation, right?
Well, there is the argument that again, as martial arts, I think I'm a butcher Bruce Lee quote. Martial arts is the most honest way of expressing yourself honestly to other people and yourself because you can't hide it when you're competing. You can't hide how you deal with fear. You can't hide how you deal with pressure. But you can also express yourself. For example, a guy who loves to throw the spinning back kick or the spinning hook kick compared to a guy who loves to throw jab cross hook low kick, you're still expressing the way in which you deal with that, and it can be seen as
Hmm.
an art form. I see it as an art form, but I would almost say that the creation of a style is the science. The
Hmm.
creation of your teaching method is the science. Competition is more art form to me.
Hmm.
If
Yeah,
that, but again,
interesting.
competition is also testing your scientific method at the same
Yeah,
time.
but I
So
get what you're saying, 100%. That it's another way that was put by a guy named Rory Miller. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He said that conflict is communication. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
it's like, and I get that there is an expressive element to fighting for sure. And
yeah,
that's why martial art is, it's not like a inaccurate term on the
yeah,
face of it. It just can be a little bit misleading when a lot of what you do in combat sports, I think, is good and makes a lot of the skills that are developed in combat sports more practical. Is that it's actually quite scientific. It's the basic scientific
method.
process. It's like
Yeah,
hypothesis. You test your hypothesis and you refine it to make it better. This is how the techniques are developed in competition, and it works. It's
yeah,
like, but then the art, and not that I'm not. We were talking a lot about kata before. It's like it was another one of my group that I've lately been accused sometimes of being like anti kata in the sub,
well, I've seen,
where it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
I love kata. Like it is something that since I was a child, I have been fascinated by. Right? I think it's cool. I
yeah,
like it a lot. I practice it all the time. It's just as time goes on, I start to realize more and more what you're actually practicing. It's not that there aren't combative applications. There are. It's great. But it's not what develops your ability. Kata is kind of a separate thing, and I think that the old masters probably did understand this a little bit better. It's a routine that you go through that does contain some information, maybe that you can extract out of it and apply to like your functional training. But you kind of practice it as an art in and of itself, right? It's an exercise, it's a way. And I think this is sometimes, again, things that people misconstrue, like even just exercise science in general has come such a long way since then. I'm not saying that like a kata based exercise system is particularly like effective either, but you're moving your body, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you certainly will strengthen your body a little bit by just repeatedly going through these kata for years. And I think that certainly is traditional. It's all, and like you mentioned before, there's a meditative aspect to it as well, like this concept of refining something, like the process of refining something has value in and of itself, like almost to a certain point that it doesn't really matter what you're refining. And again, these are cultural things. Like the concept of kata goes well beyond martial arts and Japanese culture. I know, like they have kata in for I read an interesting book, but no, even like car manufacturers like have kata in Japan. At least I've been told that a kata is just like a very specific way of doing something. They'll talk about like flower arrangement,
The tea ceremony
the
has
tea
a kata
ceremony,
also.
exactly.
Yeah,
This concept of having something that you perform in a very exact way and that you continually refine, right? It's not practical like in a fighting sense, but in like
yeah,
a mental sense, in a developmental sense. You're strengthening your body, you're exercising, you're moving. And this is what I love about it. Like I do love just the process of continually refining something and always making it better and make it an aesthetic too, and making it like a beautiful movement with it the same way. This is stuff that I think people sometimes will like kind of like be against in the practical karate and the bunkai community, at least in the West. But I've come to appreciate it more and more the longer that I go with it. It's like, yeah, I guess that is a big part of what I always liked about it. It's just when I'm practicing and performing Nahachi, for instance, it's not really like I could skip that entirely for practical purposes. I could just spar and hit the heavy bag and wouldn't be any worse off. but I'll practice the kata for the rest of my life, I think, just because that process of continually refining it, and it adds something to my life, it's like a sense of expression in of itself,
Yeah, I mean, you could take every technique in the kata that's been told separately as a drill and do it like
hmm
that and spar it and drill it and never use the actual kata ever. But there is,
hmm
I mean, I'm the same. I love kata for the sake of like I enjoy doing kata. I enjoy performing. Again, same. I mean, you watch over the old kung fu movies, like it's cool. Um,
Yeah,
and I
it's
do,
cool.
yeah, and I do
Yeah,
think, I don't have a huge issue changing up kata. Like I practice kata traditionally for ranking, and then the
yeah,
katas with the most practical stuff, I have adjustments because I'll change them
sure.
per kata. Like
Yeah,
how am I applying it this time, and I'll adjust it, and I'll do it more like shadow boxing where I fluidly move it like how I'll actually move if I'm competing, and it'll look
yeah,
almost like shadow boxing with karate moves. Um,
yeah.
but one thing, like you said, the art of it is like something that's totally useless for practical application, but can be beautiful when it comes to understanding your body, controlling your body movement, and perfection over time. Is like how often I throw a punch here and it's just like the punch is to there.
hmm
Like I'll throw it a little high and like the punch is to here, and I'm like,
hmm
in a fight, how tall is my opponent? Here, here, here,
Yeah,
here.
of
Are they
course.
like who cares?
Doesn't
Like
matter,
we
right?
just
Yeah,
that doesn't matter.
yeah. Yeah, man,
So
and it's love it. Like, I don't know how old you are, but we're both young, It's also one of those things where it's like I can certainly imagine a future for myself if I'm still here, if I'm still
yeah,
training and physically able when I'm 75 years old. It's like, well, what is that going to look like? I know guys who box who are that age. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
but they're not getting in the ring and sparring. It's obvious at that point that it's not about that for them. It's that
They're just having
I
fun.
assume that they've been doing it for a long time. I don't know for certain. They've probably been doing it for since they were young men. It's something that they know and they love and they enjoy doing, and they know that they need something to keep them physically active and to keep them moving, right? So the training for them is shadow boxing, right? Light bag work. Those older guys too. I don't know if I see them really wailing on the heavy bag as much. They use a lot the paddles instead of the
Yeah.
focus mitts too, which again I think helps with the joints and the impact. Sure. Yeah. No, no, I'm done. You're good. Yeah. hmm
This place is crazy in some of the best ways sometimes.
yeah.
There are fights between guys. There's a guy at my gym who's good for his age. He started, I don't know, he started way after me. Okay? But
hmm
he's a grandpa and there with his grandkids, maybe in his 60s. He's out here
Yeah.
competing. He has a knockout and he's fighting other
Cool.
guys his age. And in my head, I'm like, you knocked out another 60-something-year-old man. This is not okay. Like,
Ah.
this is not okay. Who is
Yeah,
allowing this?
yeah.
But
That's
they're out.
crazy. Yeah.
But dude, one of the craziest parts about being here in Japan is I remember the first time I wasn't competing, I just watched a fight, and they had two guys come in, and one guy comes out and is like karate gi in his belt, and he's like 67. I'm like, what is
hmm
happening right now in this country? It was crazy,
Yeah, yeah.
and like they're going and throwing their. I'm like, oh my god. So
hmm
America, you don't see stuff like that, but you do see sometimes like old people getting at it in the ring here in Japan. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's
Full contact.
crazy.
Yeah, I've never seen that with full contact. I have seen point fighting, with older guys like
Yeah.
that too. But yeah, no, that's crazy. Now it's one of those things
Yeah.
though, but and obviously people can do that at an advanced age, like I know certainly, but
I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna do
yeah, and for
it.
most
Like,
people probably not interested, it might be a little questionable whether or not they should for their health. But
yeah.
I guess that
100%.
it was another thing about it that I think this is a developmental point in the art is that a lot of the really influential key players here, they were making their biggest accomplishments when they were older, was later in life. Motobu might have been a little bit of a unique case where he was still a little more rough and ready despite being 65, right? But for a lot of those guys, like, what does karate look like if you're still training at a more advanced age, And I take this to heart, man. I'm very, very close to my grandmother. She turned 90 this year. spent a lot of time with her. I love her to death, and it's terrible the way that your body just degrades in your later life, you know. And the West, I feel like and I don't know, I don't have that, I don't want to speak. You probably could say better than I can, but I think that people are generally healthier in Japan. I think even a lot of Europe, you know, it's like the Americans in particular are very, very unhealthy. And you know, for my grandmother, she's 90 years old. She hasn't done anything athletic in her entire life, pretty much. Certainly not. If she did it when she was young, should ask her next time. Maybe when she was in school, right? But you know, it's like she's 90 years old. Like say maybe she was 20 was the last time she was doing something like that. So for 70 years she hasn't had anything like that. And I think people, you know, we tend to obsess over fighting because we're martial artists, is what we like, right? But like, I really don't want to diminish too much like that. And a lot of the old masters did explicitly say this. They talked a lot about health. A lot, all including Motobu. Motobu had a
Yeah.
doctor that wrote the introduction to one of his books, talking about how great karate is for your health, strengthens your bones and your muscles,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. I think that it's questionable how much a lot of these old masters actually knew how to fight. I don't know how much practical experience any of them had. Like even like because we're like what we're talking about with Motobu. You know, Motobu is like the best example, right? And this is a guy who had a 1-1 record in the ring, and not
Right.
even to mention the 1-1 record. Like we don't know who he fought, even.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you know.
Yeah.
And other than that, it was like street fights when he was young, and like and challenge and the random challenge matches. You know, it's like
Marines with more experience than him.
exactly, yeah. You know, it's
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like they all said how like the hell because they did understand though that karate will strengthen your body. They had a lot more experience with that even personally with it too. Because let's like I think it's just important to appreciate that combat sports as we have them today have never really existed in the past, and
Yeah.
you can find similar things, especially like folk wrestling that exists,
Yeah.
but it's not the same. You know, there
Maybe
weren't
Thailand.
international leagues where you
Yeah.
had people competing with ranking systems that got it. I
Yes.
mean, I don't know. You know, history is a big, vast thing. Maybe I'm speaking a little bit too soon. You know, it's like I do know a little bit about like gladiators and the
I
Roman
was about to say.
Colosseum and stuff. Like there they certainly did fascinating videos in like the 1920s
Yeah.
of those guys straight up kickboxing, which
Yeah.
is really cool when you consider what karate was like.
You had some of it in Rome, specifically because that
Mhm.
Greece connection, um, and then you had some of it in Thailand. But I don't think I do know they had matches and stuff in China, but I don't think it was set up like the way it was in Thailand type situation. Like I don't think it was the same.
Yeah,
And even if they did have it, it wouldn't have been anything comparable to what we have now, where it's universal. Where even
sure.
the ability to record it and take a picture. Like
Oh yeah,
if
film
someone said
study.
this, yeah, like imagine someone's like this guy defeated this other guy with a cool lock with his arm, and imagine the guy saw an armbar with his eyes, but he had
Hmm.
no way of writing it down, recording it, anything.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
the 1600s. Then guy goes to his teacher and tries to show him an armbar after seeing it once from across the crowd. That's useless. Like they're not going to be
Yeah.
able to even pretend to demonstrate it. So it's
They're
like
gonna have to painstakingly recreate it through trial and error. You know.
and I guarantee you someone's gonna be like, dude, this doesn't work. And most people are gonna like blow it off.
Hmm.
Unless you were there at the fight yourself and tried to figure it out for hours. Like it's it's not practical to believe that they could have the same level of knowledge that we can have now with our
Yeah.
current level of communication. It's just not
It was just a
realistic, and
different world. You know.
it's a different world. Again, we talked about the 3-step sparring. You know, the kumite that we do that's traditional.
Hmm.
So much of it was created by people who we have their information on, and we know they have almost no real fighting experience.
Yeah.
Which I think it's important to like. We know the guy who created this kumite because it was created in like the 50s or the 40s. It's not that old. We know this person didn't fight. Why are we
Yeah.
acting like it's religion? Like it's like
Yeah. No.
why are we treating it Like
We can never
I can't.
change it. We can never drop it, you know.
Yeah, and that I think has to do with the that Asian and like respecting elders kind of. That's one thing I noticed. It's very serious here, even in the work system, and the
Hmm.
way the laws are set up here is just all based around the older you are, the way seniority works with age. It's very, very different than it is in the West. As a matter of fact, instructors here, you have honorifics like San, which is just like Mr. or Mrs. whatever, right? And you have Sensei. Older students will sometimes not call their instructor Sensei. They'll say San because they don't want to call teacher to a younger person.
Hmm.
Like which
Interesting.
I heard it and I mentioned like why does he call him sensei? It's like the age. And I was like because he's 10 years older. He doesn't say sensei. He
Hmm.
just uses the normal honorific. And I'm like, what a because like in America, I mean, you say sensei, coach, sifu, whatever.
Yeah,
It doesn't. I'll say it to a 17-year-old if I'm in his class. Like,
sure. Yeah,
but again, that ancestor worship is actually part of their religion, literally. So
sure. Yeah, yeah.
I think that is a huge effect on how they view uh the growth, and I think it keeps karate kind of slow. I think it's one of the things you look at again, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu obviously starts here, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the main one now, and those differences in culture allow, I think, for continual growth and to
Hmm.
stay kind of in front of the pack when it comes to being able to apply and do things practically. Is they're consistently
Hmm.
willing to adapt to what works right now, and I think that's something that we're missing a lot in our karate world,
Yeah,
our
and it's
traditional
just
world.
one of those things, man, that like I just try not to be a hater. You know what I mean? Like I get it. Some people want to train in this traditional way. And I really do feel like I understand that, like I do understand the appeal that it's just like, I just want to get in there. I want to get a sweat. I want to, refine something and feel like, and like, how much does it really matter to me whether or not it's practical? You know, like I get that, 100%. But at the same time, you know, just honesty is the best policy. And again, I'm not trying to be critical of others here, critical of myself. These are things I feel like we all kind of go through to some extent. I just don't want to make false claims about what I do. I don't want to tell my students that I'm giving them something. And I don't know, I guess maybe I do have a critical thing here because I think there's an ethics component to it. Like it's unethical to tell my students that it's like it's not that things don't have value, right? But I'm just not going, and I think that there are some teachers that do this, and I don't think it's right that I'm not going to teach my students things that I don't believe, that don't work. I'm not gonna, yeah, like I'm not gonna be dishonest with my students ever.
Yeah,
I'm gonna earnestly approach this situation where I'm gonna do the best that I can to give them the best instruction possible the the goals that we have in mind with our training, right?
yeah,
And maybe that isn't self-defense. And that I think that does justify a lot of the traditional training methods and a lot of this traditional approach. If it's not about that for you, if for you it's, I want to practice an art form that I'm continually refining, that is good for my health and is just a part of my life, that's great. I really do respect that. I do. But, if you want to spend, and a lot of it's based on developmental, like I said, we're both still pretty young. And a lot of people I teach are even younger. It's like I want the kids in my school when they go away to college when they're 18. I want the time that they spent with me to be something that really does help them to handle themselves if they have to. Right. And if we're practicing, and because I'm a part of an organization, I'm not in control of my testing requirements. When I do practice something that I don't think is practical, I tell my students that. I tell them like, hey guys, you got to do these prearranged drills in testing. And that's why we're doing them, because They're part of your testing process. So we're gonna learn them and we're gonna refine them to the point that you meet your testing requirement, and that's it. It's like we're not gonna go farther than that with it. I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of things, and this might be a little bit that divide that you're talking about with the Eastern and the Western cultural differences. That there's this desire sometimes always to just justify everything that you do, and I'm the sensei here, and I've been training for so long, and we give each other belts, and we get belts and ranks, and it's like I'm kind of a big deal because I have this high rank in this organization and all these students that look to me. And there's an insidious thing, man, that like there's a kind of popular thinker I like named Jordan Peterson, and he talked about this in a video once that I thought was just fascinating. It blew my mind that there's a danger to moving up in a hierarchy, because as soon as you accept a place in a hierarchy where you have authority, that authority needs to be justified, right? So authority figures find themselves in a place where they have to be very careful about revealing vulnerabilities, right? Because those vulnerabilities can call into question the validity of their authority. And I think it's a nice thing about being younger in this space. I'm so much younger than most of my peers. Like most guys running karate schools and or are much older than me. But that changes as time goes on. I'm not getting younger. But it. I think it really helped me to have a healthy mentality with that, where I can tell my students like, hey, I don't have all the answers here. Just continually learning and trying to improve and trying to be better. But I think that's one of the major barriers that we have in the karate community, is that you have the older generation that are resistant to this kind of change because it does kind of undermine their authority. And so I don't think it like necessarily has to, you know what I mean? Like, but I think that ultimately that's where a lot of the pushback comes. A lot of things that people like to leave unspoken. It's like, what do one steps or pre-range kumite actually do for you as a fighter? It's like, it's not really very well defined, and it's like, so maybe we should stop doing it. Yeah, it's probably actually makes you worse. Probably creates more bad habits, right? But it's like maybe we should stop doing it. It's like, nope, like definitely not gonna do that. Mhm. Yeah,
You do have, do not get me wrong, you have sports coaches with huge egos, similar issues. I know guys who's like, well, you're not doing it our way. It's not the correct way. And I'm like, dude, get over yourself. Like, it worked, didn't it?
yeah,
And it's like, not just me, but like professional fighters at the highest levels do it. So why do you have a problem? Um, but so it happens there too. But I will say, you have sports combat coaches are more willing to let new stuff in because they have less of a chip on their shoulder because they've done something to prove that they deserve to be there. Even if they don't
yeah.
believe they're the best, even if they know they're not the best guy in the room. Like at my gym in America, they have a guy. The head coach of the gym is John. John's
Hmm.
not the best fighter. Eddie is the best fighter. Eddie fights for one championship. He's by far better than John, but
Hmm.
John's technically the head coach. And there are other fighters there. Um, Guys will come in quarter Eddie. There are guys who I can beat in sparring, but I still can look to as a coach because they've proved it, because they've done it, and like they don't have a chip on their shoulder, and it
Hmm.
allows for a different way to approach new things because you have
Yeah,
less to prove. And I think a
sure.
lot of our older masters never had a chance to prove it, and I wonder if there's maybe something in the back of their head that causes a little bit of extra pushback. within that.
Yeah,
And
no, I definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know, I was mentioned that Peterson brought up this concept. He, of course, was not talking about martial arts. He was just
yeah,
talking about in general, and the way that he put it was that it's very different. It's very difficult to move information up a hierarchy. The way that hierarchies are like inherently set up is that they're top down, right? We have these people in position of authority, and their job is to disseminate the information down through the hierarchy. But, when you have something like fighting, that develops and changes over time, you get, guys like Ian, I think and it's why I have so much respect for that guy and for his influence over me personally, but then also just because, he is like a kind of an older guy that's been a pioneer here and seems to be open to that kind of change a lot more, and I think that that's really admirable. I think we give kind of lip service to that. People are like, I'm a lifelong learner, I'm still learning. And people will be like, most aren't. Yeah. Yeah. I think the reality, most would be like, my students are my greatest teachers. You hear like people kind of say these things, but I don't think that many people really practice that as much as they preach. And I get like, I'm not trying to be too judgmental here because I am not in that position. And 20 years from now, when I'm the old guard, I'll probably be an asshole that's like, these kids gotta get off my lawn with their new ideas. It's like, I'm not
please
trying to
don't.
be
I don't think
too,
so.
well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's admirable not to be that way. But
Yeah,
the only point is that, like, I do understand how they, especially when the business gets involved here, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm in this position already. It's like, this is how I make my living, like
yeah,
it's a little bit of a sensitive subject to be like, yeah, but how much do you actually know?
yeah.
It's like that affects like, I don't know. I guess like my only
No,
point
it affects
being,
your money if you're using martial arts and it's making a decent income, then you
sure,
have to look like the best guy in the room, or at least be very good and have the respect of all the best guys in the room. And I think that's also part of it. Like John may not be the best guy, but Eddie respects her. So like the best guys in the room respect the coach, even if he's not the best one. And I think that's
sure.
important. And I think it's a very decent level of fear uh, that the loss of respect.
Yeah.
And you
And I
mentioned,
think,
oh,
I think there's a respect that comes with the honesty as well, though. At
I
this
agree.
point, I tell my students that they should wrestle in high school.
Oh,
I tell my students point blank, these kids have been training with me since they're young, like young teenagers.
yeah,
I'm like, yo, guys, I didn't wrestle when I was in high school because I didn't think it was a martial art. you know, I wish
we
that
were
I
so wrong.
had. I
Yeah,
wish that I had though. And I'm not telling. I'm telling like self like you should consider it.
yeah,
Like and as a business owner, there's no reason for me to say that to them right from a straight financial perspective. Like,
yeah,
hey, you guys should stop coming to my class and you should join the wrestling team at your school.
yeah.
You know, but I don't know. I think the truth matters. Like if I want to be, and I think like my own point that I was making is that people do respond to that. And well, I think there's a genuine people understand that that's coming from a genuine place. Like, hey, he's telling me this when he doesn't have like he has financial incentive not to say that, but he's saying it to me anyway. I think that a lot of people like I get it that the issue is like, well, why should I train with you then if you can't really teach me how to grapple? Like, and that's what I tell my students. I'm like, hey guys, this clinch sparring that we do is just to give you some basic skills. I think it's a good supplement to the other stuff that we do. I'm just like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to make you into an expert grappler or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you ever, if you clinch up with somebody who's a good grappler, has got wrestling experience or judo experience or something, like, I tell my students explicitly, like, that's a different thing than what we're doing here with each other, But I just think that people do respond to that well because I just think it's important. Just honesty is the best policy. It's good to be open with ourselves and open with our students about stuff like that. And I think that it actually creates a deeper level of respect because I'm exposing my vulnerabilities to my students and letting them know that, that not everything I do I'm an expert at and that I'm like super, like really good at. But then they have reason to believe that, like, oh, they know, but they do know who I actually am. I'm not trying to portray myself as somebody that I'm not. So when they come, if they choose to come back and they choose to continue training with me, they at least know, and because I really mean it. And it's like, hey, I'm going to do my best to be the best teacher for you that I possibly can be, right? And that includes telling you when I'm, when I don't have something that to offer you.
I do think what you're saying is a sign of a good coach. I mean, at the end of the day, you take the money out of it, you want a coach who's going to do what's best for the student. And that's not always like I remember saying, like, to me, I respect the coach who says, I'm not as good as he is at boxing. You come to me for your kicking, but you should pick up from your some boxing tips from that guy or work with him.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's the coach I actually prefer to be my head coach. Like I may have other
yeah.
coaches, but the guy who I want to organize and structure my actual training is the guy who's willing to tell me to my face what his weaknesses are and then lead me in that right direction.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I'm assuming, I'd assume, you kept most of your students even after telling them this?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
I did lose. I mean, like, I'm proud of them. I have a couple of my
Yeah.
black belts that are wrestling now. And
Oh, okay.
that means, and they come back on the off season, but it's actually become a little bit of a, it's funny too, because like you have like, I had a single kid. So, and his dad actually was a Division 1 wrestler, so he was already going to wrestle. That was already the plan. But then it becomes a part of the culture of the school, where I had now I have four of like the young teenage boys who have joined the wrestling team. And, I don't know, something that just maybe a more recent development in my school, and something that's made me reflect on it a little bit, that is a trade-off, because obviously when they're wrestling, they're not training with me, but they did come back, in the off season, because, it's sure. Yeah. Well,
Actually,
it's one of those things, man, that like you cross train, I cross train, like we all. And the attitude sometimes among karate schools is like, yeah, but you should be like super, super high level in karate first and then cross train. It creates this like, it's like gatekeeping, like this barrier. It's
yeah.
like you must be fully indoctrinated into karate and then it's okay to step
Yeah.
outside of it. I don't know. I just don't think that I wouldn't be being honest with my students if that's the approach that I took to it. I tell them explicitly that I'm just like, man, I did everything wrong. It's like I
Hey,
should have wrestled. I should have wrestled in high school.
that's
I
my big
should
thing.
have
I was
gotten
just like,
into. I should have walked into a Muay Thai school when I was like 19 instead of when I was like 29.
yeah.
I was older than that actually. I was like 30, already injured and banged up from like point competition and stuff like
Mm.
that. And it's one of those things where I don't know. It just it creates the kind of culture that I want in my school and among my group, which is that it's not about me. It's not about it's about you being the best martial artist that you can be. And a big part of that is that, like there's this lie that I think underlies a lot of martial arts, is that you can just always be better and always practice and you're always better. I think people don't want to talk about this, but it's the truth, is that people plateau. If you only practice traditional karate forever, I think that
Oh, there's definitely a plateau.
you get to a certain point and
Yeah.
you don't get better than that. And you kind of just are, at best, maintaining your own ability.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that the best way often to really challenge yourself and to really push new ground is to learn something new, is to cross. And it's nothing new. This is what everybody, that this is how martial arts often are created, like cross training wise. It's not like guys have
Most of the
never crossed.
original martial artists, like founders of our systems, cross trained. Even Funakoshi
Absolutely.
cross trained. So
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. He trained with Kano and stuff like that. And and things were a little bit different back then too. There wasn't like karate wasn't like an established style. The same like you want to talk about
yeah,
Motobu. Motobu trained with so many people. It's kind of what he was like
yeah,
almost known for. He would go around and train with different teachers, and sometimes they would turn him away because they're like, "You're just gonna, you're gonna go pick fights with with this
yeah.
stuff. So I don't want to teach you." You know, it's just there's a lot of things about the commercial, and I don't know if it's this way in Japan. You can tell me, if it was, but
It's
the
the most political
commercial
place of all time.
most political. Yeah.
It's not commercial per se, but it's, oh my god, dude, I just got, I was supposed to get my next degree here, and
Hmm.
turns out due to some political BS, because my instructor, Americans in Weichi in America, we don't care what organization you're in. There's like 3 or 4 organizations training in one dojo at my spot in Sacramento. No one gives a crap what group you're
Yeah.
in. So when I came here, my instructor, who's a 10th degree, gave me
Hmm.
a letter to Shinjo, who's not in her organization, but they're childhood friends, saying,
Hmm.
"Hey, can you find me a teacher?" Shinjo connects me to another guy. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Shinjo connects me to another guy. It turns out I'm actually training with like the founder of my system's great grandkids, right? And he
Yeah. I
connects me
saw
to
that.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they think I'm under Shinjo, but I'm not under Shinjo. I'm under a different group that my head instructor in America isn't even a part of, because I got it ranked through another set. And it's this whole thing. And their organization's like, "We're not ranking them. That thing's too crazy." And then I'm like, my main actual instructor and the one who signed my black belt certificate all said it's okay to rank under
Hmm.
you. They don't care. And they're like, "Politically, we just don't." And I'm like, all right, so I'll just wait till I go back to America. Because the
Yeah.
guy I've been training with, he said he wanted to rank me this time last year. And he's
Hmm.
like, "There's only one time a year in which we do it. I'm excited. We're going to teach you what you need specifically for our organization. We're going to get you ready. You're ready to go." And then I went to a seminar thing, and they thought I was above. And pretty much, long story short, everyone was like, "You're ready. I'm excited." Yada yada yada. And I never even met the head guy,
Hmm.
and he sees my organizational certificate, and he's like, "We don't rank their black belts. We don't want him." I'm like, politically, he's like, and the guy my instructor I've been training with is like so embarrassed. He's like, "I'm
Hmm.
gonna talk to this other guy, see if we can convince him, but there's some political stuff. Like apparently we don't rank within people from your organization. We don't take them. I'm sorry." He's all like, because he didn't know what group I was in because of all the crazy dots of how I got to him,
Sure.
and so he like it's just this
It's funny
whole
how
thing.
even within styles, right, you get this
Yeah, we're
like
all
stuff. I know.
Weichi.
I know you're
It's
all the same style.
oh,
And
and it doesn't help. I accidentally pissed off his mom, who I like I said, since he's related to the family, I
yeah.
didn't know. So a guy I work with said he did my style of karate. We were talking. We were all friends. I'm like, "Oh
Hmm.
well, dude, come to my dojo. Let me talk to my instructor." And my instructor's like, "Bring him on over. We'd love to see him." I
Hmm.
didn't know this, but turned out his dad is the guy who caused the first ever organizational split in my system of people
Oof.
who left my instructor's family and like left to make their own organization. And it was his dad, and I didn't know who he
Yeah.
was.
Ah.
And apparently I caused huge family drama. They were pissed at me. And I'm
Damn.
like, maybe that's part of it too. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe they're mad at me. I don't know who these people are, man. I'm
Yeah.
American. But
Sounds like a
yeah.
mess. Yeah. No, I got you. I don't know. It's one of those things that it's just, I just think that all of the politics and the stuff that gets involved in martial arts,
Crazy.
it's like, it's kind of inevitable that to some extent stuff like that happens, but it's also, I don't think anybody would say it's just not what it's really about. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like politics I think is the worst part of the whole thing. One thing I love about, like I said, where I'm at Sacramento is that, again, I think part of it is there's no money involved. So um, the instructor was teaching at the college campus. She wasn't taking a dime herself from it. Right now, they only charge enough to cover rent, so it's like $20 a head. Like they
Wow.
charge barely anything. Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, the two head instructors, one's a ninth and one's a 10th degree. They're both retired. One's a college professor. One was a lawyer. And it's two. Like they're money fine. Like they don't need
Sure.
money.
Yeah.
And
It's a
so
passion.
it's a passion. And so you have all these people training, and it's like multiple one system but multiple organizations. And you talked earlier about like that need for authority, and one thing I like about where I'm training in SAC versus other places where I've trained and I've noticed a difference is Sacramento is the only one where there's zero financial incentive, and it's also the only one where they are so open to like adjusting Weichi drills to make them more practical and
Cool.
trying out new things. And like my oldest sensei, Joe Knight, she's older. She's like she doesn't do them herself. Like to
Hmm.
her, it's an art form. But she'll sit there and watch and be like, "That's cool." Like literally, it's
Yeah.
just like thumbs up.
Yeah. That's the
And,
way to do it, you know?
and it's like, and even Rob Sensei, who's a ninth dan, he's like, he'll be teaching a technique, and he'll say something like, and I know you fight, Leonard, you know, you may see this a bit different, you know, with your combat experience. And I'm like, dude, you're out here the ninth dan teaching, but, and it's not to say that on me, but what I'm saying is he's so humble, as in like
Hmm.
a guy will come in with fight experience, and he'll be like, I know you have that fight experience, what do you think? And he'll talk to him, and it's like, both of the instructors are so open to all kind of advancements. And now there's other people in my dojo who are cross training and then bringing it back, like
Yeah.
doing. One of them just started training with Sensei Myers and doing Kyokushin and Muay Thai, and they're bringing it back
Cool.
and putting it into the Weichi, and it's. But I do think part of it is the fact that there's no financial incentive from the instructors, so they don't feel as much threat about not being the head. But also, we all respect them the same. Like there's
Hmm.
no you don't know what I know, lack of respect. Like there's the same level of respect, so we also don't probably trigger that. Also, they're both so much older, they don't care about fighting anymore,
Sure. Yeah.
like at all.
That sounds like it sounds
So
like a really good group, really good community, you know?
yeah,
And listen, karate's full of that, and I don't mean to be too critical with it too. You know, the group that I'm a part of, you know, it's like we consider ourselves traditional Tang Sudo, and you know, we pride ourselves in being good at it. And I think that's where just a lot of people's heads are at, is that it's just like, you know, we want to be good at Tang Sudo. You know, we want to be good at this established, you know, method in the community that we're in. And you know, I get it and I respect it, but you know, it's just always implicit that you just people will talk about stuff like self-defense, and that's why it's just important to take these things seriously. You know, the longer that I do it, the more, you know, I think that's one of the first things that hits you with it all too. It's like, what does that mean? Oh, that's kind of just a word that we put out there. You know, it's like, oh,
yeah,
it's for self-defense. You know, it's like, I don't know, you know, especially we're talking about like frickin' Motabu, you know, and like the
yeah,
resources he had available to him. You know, this was also true just a few decades ago, you know, even
yeah.
when I started training, you know what I mean? Like you
UFC one wasn't
one
that long ago.
wasn't that lot, right? But I remember in, you know, the early 2000s when I was a teenager, you know, like 2005, 2006, guys I trained with would be like, just wait until somebody can really kick that gets into the UFC, then you'll see. You know,
Yeah,
they think this Taekwondo style a little bit. And even at the time, I was like, yeah, you ever heard of Benson Henderson? I was like, yeah, he's
yeah.
already
He's
done
really
that. You
sick.
know, it's like
Yeah,
he's already in there. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. But we start to see things continue to
Amazing.
develop, and we have a better idea. It's not that things don't work. You know, I love Wonder Boy Thompson. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Michael
he's one
Venom
of my favorites.
Page. Yeah,
Yeah,
Michael Venom Page. You had like these sport karate guys. It's like they're in there.
Raymond
You know,
Daniels.
yeah, Raymond Daniels. Exactly. It's in there. Like all of Karate Combat, like all the stuff going on
Yeah,
there. It's really cool stuff. You know, it's like people put up defenses and they put up barriers, put up walls, and they just don't really need to be there. It's not
yeah.
good or bad. You know, it's not that this sucks and this is good and all that. It's like, let's just clarify terms here. You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
like, what do we mean when we say self-defense? It's like, you know, what's the reality? Like, how does, you know, because sport karate, nobody would argue that sport karate doesn't have a very specific rule set. It's like, how is this going to change when contact becomes harder? It doesn't mean everything is just nonsense and just goes out the door, but it means it does need to be adapted. That's true of Kyokushin too. You know what I mean? It's like those guys aren't going to stand at the same range when they're allowed to hit each other, punch each other in the head.
a strong believer that there's people hate it,
Oh, definitely. I
like the
think it's
timing.
also it's a good place to start, for like
Yes,
young kids, lighter contact a little
yeah,
bit,
but now,
Yeah,
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 to a 7-year-old, a
Oh,
lot of
definitely
moms aren't
not,
even gonna
man.
be okay with it. Yeah.
And the last episode I did on my podcast, which hopefully I'll be bringing back soon, I actually have an interview with Noah that I've been meaning to publish, but there's been some
Oh,
issues with it. But the last guy that we interviewed was a guy who has um expertise in concussions and brain injuries, right? And he was even talking about. I felt really justified actually because it's something that was a part of my background. That the younger you are, too, because the brain is developing, the
developing.
more serious the risk is. Like it's significantly more serious. Like young kids should not be taking heavy blows to the head.
Yeah.
They just shouldn't, right? And suddenly it's like, wow, point fighting does make a lot of sense in that context. That it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
how am I going to get these kids to practice something that teaches them some good skills, but does it in an appropriate, safe way for them, right? I think it makes sense. Where I would take issue with it a little bit is that I would say that is where my development has gone is that point fighting is not a good place to start, but it should progress to kickboxing, in my opinion.
Yes.
And I know
Agreed.
you've competed in the IKF, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually where I think I want to go with it. That it seems like it's a good because I mean it's point based as well. It's not full contact, semi contact, right?
Yeah. We moved out. I think.
Interesting. Okay. Now, unfortunately, it's not anywhere in my area. It seems like there's some in the southern states and stuff like that, but it's like I think that not having a mono fixation on a very specific style of training or style of competition is a good thing. Just to bring it full circle is like Abernethy and also just cross training too. It's like I grew up where sparring was point fighting essentially, and it's fine. It definitely
A little kid, it was like that for me too.
Yeah, and it's fine. I think it taught me some good skills, taught me some good competition skills. But the way that I think and that might be the best way to describe my development, the way that I view martial arts training now is that it's just spar different ways to develop different skills. It's good to have a sport that you participate in, of course. It's good to have different ways of training. But you know, when I spar in boxing or I spar in jujitsu, I'm developing very different skills. And then even in my own karate teaching and training, I have three styles of sparring: point fighting, right? Continuous sparring, light contact, continuous sparring, and clinch sparring, right? And I think that's just the big thing for me, man, is that it's like we tend to concentrate on drills and kata and applications and all of this stuff. And it's fine. They each have their time and place. But having a robust approach to sparring and live practice, I think is what's really, I guess, what's going to help to develop you as a martial artist. I'm sure you can appreciate that as a guy who comes from that
I
diverse
can.
background.
I think the one area, and I think this may be because karate drills, traditional drills, are trash. But for the most part, I won't say all, but for the most part, one thing I noticed is here in Japan, there's a lot of sparring. There's a positive place for that. But
Mm.
I actually think that you should drill, especially depending on how light or heavy you're sparring, almost as much, if not more, than you're sparring, if the drills are the right kind of drills.
Mm-hmm.
So my clinch got good from drill work.
Mm-hmm.
And so did a lot of my striking techniques all flowed from drills. I got my timing from drills, but I drill very specifically. Like, so I'll do live drills. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like a basic one would be like, this guy's gonna throw a jab. I'm gonna give you a set counter, but he's not gonna tell you when he's gonna throw the jab. He's gonna throw the jab full speed, and he's gonna
Yeah.
try and touch your
Yeah.
head. So it's
Gotcha.
like It's not like he punches, you circle and hit. It's not like
Sure.
it's like the guy's flowing, he's throwing feints, he's getting, and then he's hitting, and you have to pop kick or pop and
Mm.
counter this. So it's the one thing is I here in Japan you learn almost from the sparring. Even in
Mm-hmm.
kickboxing, it's very different. But they also spar really freaking hard here. It's not healthy. I wouldn't stay here forever. Like doing it like that. But
Yeah.
um, I think drilling, but I think especially from the karate standpoint, the view of how the drills are done, you gotta wipe them. Like if I'm
Mhm.
drilling for action, even self defense, even trying to use a weichi technique in real life, I would not do any of the weichi. Oh my god,
Yeah.
shit again. Um,
Yeah, man.
I would
I
not do any of the weichi kumite.
Sure, yeah, and what you're talking about, are you familiar at all with my friend Josh Peacock and his podcast, Combat Learning Podcast?
You gotta send me these podcasts, man.
Yeah,
You gotta.
it was one to check out. My favorite podcast. My favorite podcast is Combat Learning by my friend Josh. Check it out. You'll like it. But what you're talking about is key, right? Where you're talking about it's the difference between live drilling and compliant drilling. You know what I mean? Like, and karate is terrible for this, that we do everything just compliant. The guy just stands still with it. And it makes such a difference. Because like you're saying, you might be working something very specific, but it's like, okay, they're going to jab you and you're going to try to counter the jab, right? That's not sparring, right? Because it's very constrained. We're doing very specific things, but it's live because you cannot, in a compliant drill, you cannot include all of the relevant information to making a counter on a jab work, right? It has to be done live. There's just an amount of information that you cannot relate in a static way. I made a video that was like, I think signifies like a really big turning point for me in my training, where I was going through a Nahachi like bunkai application based thing like that. And I explained in the video, it was at the time, it was like a relatively new development in my approach. I said, this is not training. I was like, I do this as a demonstration for my students to connect the kata to the sparring that we're doing. But there's no need for you to go through this static exercise where it's like, all right, he's going to stand still. I'll split his guard. I'll throw an elbow. He blocks it. So I grab and pull that arm down, and then I punch him in the liver with a hook punch. It was like, there's no need for you ever to like drill this over and over again in a static way like this,
Yeah.
right? Instead, you make a live drill out of it where it's like, okay, he's just going to try to block. You have to try to move around his arms and get that elbow in. If that doesn't work, try to follow up with a punch to the liver, right? And then you make a live drill out of it. And suddenly it's like eureka moment. And for my students too, like, this is a big point. I felt like the other way, there were always things I could pull off. Like, it was a certain amount of ability that I had just because I've been doing this my whole goddamn life, and I'm obsessed with it, right? But it wasn't until I started doing just live drilling and sparring as the training that I started to see my students develop ability. They just they just didn't get it. They just wouldn't understand it. As soon as you make a game out of it, right, and you add that live element to it,
It starts
they
showing up.
suddenly is so much more.
Yeah.
And that's what, and listen, it's not to be critical. I don't think Motobu really understood that. Like, I think that that's like a karate thing that wasn't present earlier on in the art, and yet we're still practicing like in this
The
methodology.
older way.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all around it. Yeah, it's got to be getting late for you, man. I know I could talk about
It's
this forever, just so you know. But whenever you're ready to jump off.
no, it's all
Yeah.
good. You're
Yeah.
right. It's almost 1:30.
Damn. Oh, sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't realize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, I don't go to bed till 2. We're actually fine.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. All
It's all
right.
good. But no, you are right. 'Cause I do need to like shower and stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the one thing that I do want to cover, because you mentioned this about being honest about what you're doing. If someone's listening, say you're a guy who's into the practical stuff, say you do own a school. I want to point out just my sensei Jeffrey Myers. One thing I really really respect about his story is he was doing karate and noticed it wasn't, or what he was doing wasn't practical after having a fully functioning school with like 70 students,
Yeah.
making all of his 100% of his income from it, like no other job. And he's like, I have to go in and now decide if I'm gonna be honest with my students and be like, yo, I found out this doesn't work and we're gonna change everything from scratch so that I can actually work, so I don't feel like I'm lying to you, and hope they don't leave and
Mhm.
he doesn't lose his entire income. And he did it.
Mhm.
He like did it, and he said he lost very few. He lost like very very few, and then now
Cool.
he has more students than he's ever had, and
That's
it's just
awesome.
one of those things where it's like honesty at the end of the day pays off, because then you can go to sleep at night knowing you're doing the right thing,
Yeah, good for
and
him, man.
people will
That's
respect
awesome.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I did an Abernathy course with him. He seemed like a really nice guy. But yeah, I can relate to that too. I feel similar, at the end of the day, having that honesty to be like, and I tell my students explicitly, and like you're saying, your students don't abandon you when you say
yeah,
this to you. If anything, they respect you more, where you tell them like, hey, I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning, you know, intensively. You know what I mean? Like I can't promise you that like everything I do is right or that I'm the best person to teach you all of these skills. What I can promise you though is that I'm always trying to learn more, and I will always try to be the best teacher for you that I can be, you know. 100%, and that means challenging myself and questioning myself and being able to change course when you notice that something's wrong. And as it's kind of what I was saying before, that's why it's cool to hear Jeff's story like that too, is that like I understand why people kind of have this aversion to that and this anxiety and their fear that they can't be honest about their vulnerabilities to their students because then it undermines their authority. I just really don't think that's how it works because that's not what they're there for. They're there training with you, not only because they like the training, but also because they like you. They like the community. They like everything else about it, right? It's just not what most people do, just like up and leave. And listen, I mean, the kind of people that would up and leave is people that's like, I want to be a fighter. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get in the ring and fight. And it's like, oh, you're telling me you can't really do that? But those aren't like the people we're generally getting in karate anyway. We're getting hobbyists. We're getting people that, exactly. Yeah. We're getting people that think karate is cool, think martial arts is cool. They want to learn some of it. They want to feel like maybe they can handle themselves, in self defense, stuff like that too. And it's been my experience as well. If anything, it makes your students respect you more because they know that you're being genuine with them. You're not just trying to, self promote. You're not self interested here, and that's what you owe to them. So anyway, I think that's a just really key point. It's an important one, and one that I think has made me better. It's made my students better, and I think it will make the entire art better too if it's something that becomes more common. We're kind of, there's like a militaristic aspect to it. You know what I mean? Like we stand in lines, say, yes, sir, no, sir, like all this stuff. And even that was another mind blowing one for me too. It's like that wasn't always a part of I mean, like, obviously there's Okinawan culture and stuff, which I don't fully understand. I'm sure like respect was always a part of it.
my understanding is very because if our schools are very respectful. Like before you come back, everything comes up, they like to begin
Mm-hmm.
and they did that at the end. When they come in, like they clean the schools. Like there's no
Mm-hmm.
janitors here. They clean their own bathrooms at the schools. There's a
Yeah.
very deep respect aspect, but I do actually think that traditionally might come from the Japanese side,
Mm-hmm.
because people are known that Okinawans are significantly more laid back than mainlanders, and
Island
even and
culture.
island culture. And so I
Yeah.
think it might be a mainland Japan thing and that military focus. And again, if you read Funakoshi's books, this whole thing is, I'm gonna give you strong men for the military. Like he literally
Yeah,
says that.
no.
Like that's
Man,
right.
it's
Like
it's something that as a Westerner too that blows my mind. It's important to, understand that like the modern art of karate comes from a specific time period, and that time period was pretty wild. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like you're talking about, it is imperial era Japan.
Yeah.
That was a wild part of world history, like in
Yeah.
general. Crazy things going on in the world at that time. But karate's modern development like really came from a time when Japan was a military, an imperialistic military society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where you get these influences into the art, and it's like, listen, they have value. Like, I'm not like anti-military, in any way, but I think that that's a part of the puzzle here. That's different than the sport aspect of it. About always, talking about how sports adapt and change because people want to win. When you bring the military into it, it's like, no, there's this strict hierarchy because you are a soldier going into battle, you know, and that became a part of karate. And I think that it might be a large part of the culprit here as to why
It's a
there's this.
huge part of Japanese culture in general.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
it's huge. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to. I have a friend who
Hmm.
works at he works here on
Hmm.
Okinawa. I don't want anyone to figure out who I'm
Sure,
talking
sure.
about. But he talks nonstop about how because of his position, because of age, because of all these cultural reasons, you cannot change anything about the school system here. Like they are so resistant to change and and like you come here, they use fax machines still for most of this
Wow.
stuff. Like people think of Japan like a technologically advanced place because you think of Tokyo or like
Yeah.
how it was 30 years ago. But guys, this place is behind technologically in everywhere their businesses work. They don't use card, like you have to pay cash in a little machine. They don't take card in most of the county offices because the older people can't use the machines. Like guys,
Wow.
it is
It's crazy.
it is ancient. It's not a technologically advanced society unless you're in Tokyo. Like people do not understand
Wow.
because they want to
Yeah. I
stick to
didn't
what's
realize that.
there for the old people. Yeah, dude,
Hmm.
it's 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 not what people. Japan is my biggest culture shock when I got here. One was the safety, but the other one was how how technologically behind the country is in places that aren't Tokyo and
Like
Osaka.
major city. Yeah, major
Yeah,
cities. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Wow. I never would have guessed, from the outside perspective. How long have you been living there?
Last August, a year and 3 months.
Cool. I mean, I assume you like it.
I love this place.
Yeah. Cool.
I am talking to my girlfriend right now that when I'm done, I want to try. Well, I want to go and live in Thailand for a bit. But I'm like,
Cool.
yo, when you're out of grad school, babe, I think we should move to Japan. Like, I'm trying to maybe
Yeah.
move out here permanently. I love this place.
Cool.
I love
Yeah,
it.
it's awesome, man. I was there once when I was a teenager. I'd love to go back. Yeah.
Do it.
I remember it just being gorgeous, to Kyoto. I saw pictures you posted to Kyoto. Just such a
My
beautiful city. Yeah.
my favorite city in the entire world as of right now.
Yeah.
Like, I
Cool.
don't think
Osaka
anything comes
Castle
close.
also was pretty cool, man.
Have you seen Himeji, dude?
Yeah.
Forget Osaka Castle. You got to go to Himeji.
Okay.
Come
Yeah.
back,
All right.
go to
Yeah.
Himeji.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Forget Osaka's a baby castle. You got to go to Himeji, man. Oh yeah, you got to
Okay.
get back out here.
Where is that?
I think it's actually just called Himeji, the location. I think the location's named after
Okay.
the castle.
Cool.
So it's the largest. It was never bombed, so it's one of the castles that's not super remade. A lot of the stuff is rebuilt because of
Yeah, yeah.
war and stuff. Um, but I'm trying to find where it is. But it's gigantic. It looks like what you expect a fictional Japanese castle and like an old thing to look like walls, and you can look at. Do you see, you know Bossing Say in Avatar?
Yeah, of course. It's like my favorite
Yeah.
show.
So
Yeah.
the the town itself used to be structured like Bossing Say, wall around the whole thing, walls in the middle, like the whole
Wow.
setup. Now they tore down the outer walls later, putting in trains, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But the inner walls are still like that's the current castle, and dude, it's huge and
Cool.
still there, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
You would love
I
it.
gotta check it out.
You would
Yeah.
love it.
at some point. You know, for me too, it's nice because I could pretty easily write it off as a business expense.
Yeah.
I just gotta figure out a way to make it work. I gotta find the
Go
time.
visit some dojos and you're
Exactly. Yeah.
good.
Just take a
Yeah.
selfie like outside of the dojo.
Yeah.
Anyway, man,
All right.
really
I
nice
guess.
talking to you. A lot of fun. I know.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think really long talk. So hopefully you can
At
make
this
it
point,
into a
nobody
good
else will be
episode.
listening.
Ah,
Oh yeah.
are you,
This is gonna be good.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
over
But
two
thanks for having
hours.
me on, man. If I can get my podcast back together, because I was doing it with my jujitsu coach, and he kind of fell off, and I might start a new
I listened to some of
podcast. I
it.
don't know, but I'd love to have you on. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about your combat sport experience because it's more extensive than mine, and
Dude,
it'll
I
be
have
fun.
quite a wild story with that. A lot of
Yeah.
people. Yeah, my combat experience. I won't get into it now, but it
Hmm.
has one of the most turbulent beginnings and a lot. It's a deep story because I had to get through a lot of stuff to make it work. I'd love to
Wow.
talk about it now.
Wow. Yeah, that makes me interested, man. I'd love to hear it. So we got to make it work. I'd love to have you on. I'll see. The Motion Martial Arts podcast might not be a thing moving forward in the future, but if that's going to be the case, then I'm gonna probably start a new one with it too,
Okay.
and I'd love to have you on.
I love to be on, definitely.
All right,
All
cool.
right, but yeah,
Well, thanks for the invite, man. A lot of fun
of course.
talking to you, and I'll talk
Yes.
to you later.
Yeah. See you
Yeah.
next time.
All right.
Oh,
Have a good night. Yeah.
uh, if anyone wants to follow Daniel, I'm gonna put a bunch of his socials down below,
Cool.
so you can connect with his practical stuff, his YouTube and everything. But yeah, let
Awesome.
everybody go.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
If you enjoyed this interview or you enjoy practical martial arts, this is a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I will talk to you guys next time. Peace.